Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Went to Boarding School. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A few months have passed since the events that saw Bakugo's capture by the villain Alliance, All Might's victory over his arch-nemesis, All for One, and the symbol of peace announcing his retirement. Society's trust in UA security has wavered, but as a countermeasure, Principal Nedzu has converted UA into a boarding school. This way the students can be under maximum protection. Dorms have a way of bringing people together, especially teenagers. Something about young men and women sharing a common space with minimal parent intervention can make for some interesting encounters. 9:50 a.m., 10 minutes before curfew. Class 1A- Todoroki and Bakugo are present in the common area. We should stay up past curfew tonight guys, it'll be so much fun. We can hang out, play video games, watch TV, maybe play spin the bottle or something, says Mina, too hopped up on energy drinks to possibly go to sleep. Absolutely not. Rules are the backbone of society, and without them our lives would fall into utter chaos. I, as the heir to the Ingenium name, will not allow such disregard for structure and discipline. So loud, says the class as a whole. You're such a stick in the mud, Ida. What's the harm? Mina kept prodding, hoping to get Ida to back down. You should just give it up, Mina. He's more stubborn than Bakugo when it comes to the rules. Kaminari was right, so she just gave it up and they all went to their dorm rooms. Good night, Deku called Uraraka from down the hall. Good night, he smiled and waved. 10:25 p.m. Izuku sat on his bed and found himself lost in a train of thought. For the first time in a while, thoughts of Uraraka flooded his mind. It's not that his feelings towards her have faded over time, it's just that things have been so complicated with everything that has been happening lately. What about her infatuated him so much? Was it her cute smile? Was it the sound of her soft voice? Was it the way her hair rests upon her face? It was probably all those things and more. The more he found himself thinking about her, the increasingly flustered he became. His thoughts shifted away from the innocent ones from earlier. It isn't something that he did often, but he had to take care of it or he wouldn't be able to sleep. 10:45 p.m. Shortly after he began, he heard a subtle knock on his door. He ignored it, thinking he was hearing things, until it happened again. "Why no?" he said, frustrated. He tucked it back into his shorts and acted as though he were just groggily waking up with a pillow in his arms to cover up his raging erection. He tried to get it to go down, but it just wasn't happening. "Hello?" Izuku called, wiping his eyes wearily as if he had just awoken. It was Uraraka standing in front of him with cute pajama bottoms with pink bunnies on them and a fairly revealing tank top. Her and some of their other classmates were in the hallway. Uraraka's attire did not help Midoriya's situation. Uraraka put her finger to her lips. "Shhhhh, don't make too much noise or Ida will catch us." "What or why?" Uraraka yanked his arm, suddenly causing him to drop his pillow. Out of panic, he reflexively activated One for All and pulled away back into his bedroom before anybody could see him in such an embarrassing state. Acting only out of response, he miscalculated his movement, landing face first into the wall. Uraraka was standing in the doorway so nobody else from the class could see, but when he fell on his back dazed, she could see the clear outline of his manhood through his shorts. Uraraka closed the door quickly and blushed a more vibrant red than Kirishima's hair. The class was eyeing her suspiciously, trying to figure out what had transpired. Sounded like Midoriya hurt himself. "Shouldn't we go in and check on him?" asked Kyoyuka. "Though I mean no," Uraraka sheepishly exclaimed. "He'll be fine, I'll swing by later and check on him myself. It's a good thing Ida is a heavy sleeper." That was quite the smack he gave himself. "He's a man, he'll be all right." "Keep it down, Kirishima," said the class collectively. Inside his room, Midoriya was feeling immense embarrassment and shame. He was fretting, wondering if anybody saw it, still as pronounced as before. "The class probably thought I was being stuck up or something. I even pulled away from Uraraka-san. I'm such an idiot." Eventually the problem went away on its own and innocent Midoriya began to drift into a slumber. 11:44 p.m. Common area. Ochako simply couldn't get the image out of her head. She was astonished at how endowed he was given his smaller stature. The more she thought about it, she became increasingly curious as to what it was that got him that way. She vowed to hold back her feelings for him, but it has been getting increasingly hard as of late. It was obvious to the others that Uraraka was lost in deep thought. Mina wanted to crack the case. "So Ura, what you thinking about?" she asked coyly, scooting closer to her gal pal. Ochako snapped out of it and then nothing at all. Her skin matched the color of the soda Kaminari was drinking from. "Spill the beans, Ochako-san." Even Mineta was prying into her deepest, darkest thoughts. "Did you see something in Midoriya-san's room?" Toru asked inquisitively. It was painfully obvious that she did, because as soon as those words were uttered, Uraraka lit up like a Christmas tree. "Ding ding ding, we have a winner," Mina joked. The class would have pressed further, but something smelled excellent and it drew their attention. They all crept to the kitchen and what they found was shocking. Bakugo was wearing a frilly pink apron and the matching oven mitts which he brought from home and was cooking what smelled like a pork roast. It smelled so exquisite that the floor underneath them was slick with their drool. Bakugo, realizing they were there, twitched and turned around. "What the are you doing in here? Get thee out!" He blasted holes in his overmitts in his rage. "Son of a, look what you morons made me do." The class couldn't help but break down in laughter. That laughter was cut short when Tenya Ida appeared behind their backs. In their fun, they hadn't noticed him sneaking up on them. "I suggest you all head to your rooms," he said with intimidation while pushing up his glasses. Ida was dead serious this time, but that seriousness was broken rapidly by Bakugo's vulgarity. "You four eyes, this is the only time I get away from you dummies, eat shit." The class started laughing as Ida's tough facade quickly broke down. "Fine, we'll go to bed, but first," Mina started. She had planned to interrogate Uraraka further but noticed that she was on her way down the hall. "I'm gone to bed, everyone, good night." Phew, I got out of there just in time. Ochako headed back towards her room but forgot she promised to check on Deku before going to bed. He did hit his head pretty hard after all. She stood in the hallway for a while contemplating whether she should just let it blow over or if she should go check on him. Eventually she decided she needed to see him, but that might have just been her emotions overflowing. 1247 a.m. A couple of small knocks on the door stirred young Izuku from his sleep. He was less hesitant to answer now that he didn't have a snake in his trousers. He crawled out of bed and opened the door. Uraraka-sensei looked troubled. "What's wrong?" "Deku-kun, may I come in?" Sure, please do." She was amazed at his expansive collection of All Might paraphernalia. "Wow, this is incredible, you know." "Oh really?" Midoriya was skittish as always. He had every right to be. Here he was, with his crush, in his geeky All Might room, on his bed, both of them not wearing conservative clothing. It was a bit too much. "Yeah, I think it's pretty cool." She paused. "Listen, Deku-kun, I saw something earlier I don't think I was supposed to see." Izuku froze. It was as if the entire world around him was dead still and all he could hear was his heart thumping, and he was sure the rate was increasing rapidly. "You mean?" "Yeah, that's what I mean." Both were blushing furiously at this point. A moment of silence went by before Midoriya tried to break it. "Uraraka-sen, I'm sore." She interrupted him by planting her lips on his. She felt his lips were soft, warm, and so inviting. While he couldn't even think straight with what was going on, he was in utter disbelief. She caught him off guard, and the problem he left unresolved earlier sprang back into action. This surprised Ochako and made her very flush. She stared at his throbbing for a while before giving him on the cheek and leaving the room. What just happened? Did Uraraka-sen just KK me?" His feelings swelled and their effects were very evident. "Looks like I won't be getting much sleep tonight," Midoriya said, looking at the clock. 1:33 a.m. Ochako got back to her room, closed the door, and slid down with her back against the door. She couldn't believe what had happened. Furthermore, she was absolutely soaked. She was somewhat mad at herself for not being able to control her emotions, but it just felt so right. Much like Midoriya, she was feeling immense tension that had to be released before she could even hope to fall asleep. "Hopefully this all blows over by morning," she said to herself, but she hoped it wouldn't. 700 a.m. Izuku's and Ochako's alarms went off simultaneously. Both were extremely exhausted, the two of them only mustering a couple hours of sleep combined. They passed each other in the common area on their way to their respective baths. They looked at each other for a bit but then just walked their separate ways. Neither of them had the words to describe last night's events or how to even handle the situation. School hours. Throughout the day, it was obvious that something had happened between the two of them. Both were always so close but seemed distant all day. They didn't walk with each other, they didn't eat lunch together, and they didn't even speak to each other all day. The class came up with rumors as the day progressed. "You think that they got into a fight over something?" Zero suggested. "Neither of them seems like the arguing type, so that couldn't be it," Momo pondered. "It could be. Any two people can have a falling out once they disagree on something strong enough," Toru says. "Should we check on them both?" Mineta asked to everyone's amazement. "The boys can ask Midoriya-kun what's going on and us girls will ask Yura-san," Mina exclaimed. "I don't really think we should be prying into their business," Fumikage calmly responded. Todoroki agreed with this statement. Bakugo, overhearing the conversation, was getting annoyed. "I don't know why you give about that whiny-ass mother's problems. Besides, you should know your damn place and let them resolve it themselves." Did Bakugo offer some constructive advice? "Is this real life?" Mineta joked. "I will murder you, you ball-headed reject." Mineta turned to his peers with tears streaming down his face. "Help me." Neither Midoriya or Uraraka were mad at each other. They just didn't know what they could possibly say to the other. Whenever one of them thought about it, they couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Midoriya couldn't help but wonder if last night was how she really felt or if it was just a one-time thing. He began to think that he might have dreamed the whole thing, but then there wouldn't be this awkward tension today if that were the case. For some reason, Midoriya felt like the best plan of action would be to ask his mentor All Might for advice. What could possibly go wrong? As far as Midoriya is concerned, All Might knows everything. After school hours, Midoriya met up with All Might at the beach where his journey started, as he requested. "Midoriya, my boy, what's on your mind?" "All Might, I need to ask your advice on how to handle a situation." "Sure, ask away." He swelled into his muscular form to assure Midoriya. "Last night Uraraka had me and I felt really embarrassed, and she left the room and we didn't talk all day, and I don't know what to do. What if she hates me?" All Might lost his musculature and spewed. "Here, I thought you were going to ask me about heroics. My knowledge in that is far more expansive than it is with women. I mean, I'm still single, ha ha." Izuku lowered his head in disappointment. "Midoriya-kun, do what you feel is right. I know you are not the most assertive individual, but if you feel passionately about her, wear your heart on your sleeve. It appears she feels the same way about you. Remember, confidence is charming." All Might's words always came through for him when he felt down or uncertain. Even with such an unusual topic, he knew exactly what to say. There's a good reason that All Might is his idol. Uraraka was trying to cope in her own way. She didn't know who to talk to or if she should talk to any of the girls at the school about him at all, but she just wanted somebody to know it. So, she called home. "Hey sweetie, I wasn't expecting a call from you, how are things?" asked Uraraka's mother. "Tha's what I'm calling you about, ma. There's this boy." "A boy, huh? Why don't you tell me more about him?" Uraraka talked with her mother for well over an hour about Deku-kun, how amazing he is, how he inspired her to do her best, and how he's the reason she feels so much more confident today. "You're a sweetie, go after him. It sounds to me tha you feel about him the same way I felt about your dear pa. Trust me, it'll be worth it, honey. I'll talk to you soon, okay?" "Okay, ma." She hung up with a smile. She felt so much better about this than she did before. It's decided tonight is the night they both confess their feelings. 4:34 p.m. A note slipped under Uraraka's door. "Meet me at 6:30 p.m. on the roof. Midoriya Izuku." I wonder what's up with Deku-kun, she lost herself in thought. It doesn't matter, I'm telling him one way or another tonight. She felt her heart flutter the longer she looked at the note. She wanted to open the door and just pounce him before 6:30 p.m. rolled around. The more she thought about him, the more anxiety crept into her heart. Can I really do this? She asked herself. Half an hour ago, Bakugo and Midoriya are in the kitchen together alone. "Kaken, I need your help." "Screw off, Deku, you irritate me." "Please, Kaken, just hear me out." "Got him at fine, what do you want, you shit stain?" Midoriya explains to Bakugo what's been going on with him and Uraraka. "So, you want me to make your useless ass in gravity dinner? What a sadding excuse for a man you are. Why should I?" "Kaken, we both know you're way superior to me in the kitchen, and if that isn't enough to get you to help me, then here's the deal. If you do this for me, we'll fight, one-on-one, no holds barred. Now I'm interested. I've been waiting for another chance to waste your sorry ass. Name a time and place, Kaken." "I will not go back on my word. The food will be ready by 6:15 p.m. Deku." "Perfect. Also, Deku." "Yeah, don't act like the weak bastard you are." Midoriya couldn't believe his ears. Even Kaken was rooting for him. He was certain he could do this. 6:30 p.m. Uraraka got up to the roof and was blown away by what was prepared. A candlelit dinner took her breath away. There was Deku-kun standing in front of her wearing a shirt and tie holding a bouquet of beautiful red roses. She had a hunch something was going on, so she dressed up a little herself just in case, and she was glad she did. "Wow, Uraraka-san," he said, sizing her up and down, "you look gorgeous." She felt her face getting hot with his eyes on her. He handed her the flowers and pulled out her chair. "You're such a gentleman, Deku-kun," she giggled. "Well, you know, I just felt like this was the right thing to do." "Where did you get all this amazing food? It smells unreal." "Believe it or not, I convinced Kaken to make it, aha." "Bakugo, he actually helped you. What is up with that?" She couldn't believe her ears. "The Bakugo helping Deku, whom he hates so much." "Well, I just played his ego and he helped me. I'm surprised you went through all this trouble for me." She paused for a moment. "Deku-kun, Uraraka-san, I have to say something," he cut her off. He had a strong, confident look on his face which made Achako melt in her seat. "From the day I first met you, I would get lost in your presence. You had to have been the cutest, sweetest girl I have ever laid my eyes upon. On top of that, you saved me from myself, you gave me confidence going forward, and even changed the meaning behind the name Kaken used to bully me as a kid." She had a flashback to the day Deku-kun and herself faced Bakugo and Ida in the training exercise. It made her feel warm when he quoted her own words to Bakugo. "You might not realize," he continued, "how much you've impacted me, but I know that without you I'd be a shell of the man I am now. You are a pillar of strength in my life, and the more I think about you, the more I can't stop thinking about how much I need you by my side." She was absolutely stunned by his confession. She came up here with intentions of telling him how he made her feel, but she was at a loss for words. Tears rolled off her cheeks, her face was unbearably hot, she didn't know what to do with herself. "Deku-kun," she said, bursting with joy, "I'll never leave your side." She leaned into him and her lips locked with his. Every firework in the city could go off simultaneously and wouldn't compare to the sparks that flew between them. To them, they were the only people in the world, but they hadn't noticed that their classmates had a clear vantage point from Mina's room, and of course the gossipy Mina gathered everyone she could to watch them. "I knew it, go get him, Yura-san," Mina cheered. "Well, that explains the events earlier today. I knew there was some awkward tension," Kyoyuka postulated. "Attaboy," Midoriya-kun cheered Kirishima. "That lucky bastard," Mina sobbed. Ida, hearing the commotion while making his rounds, was curious and checked it out. When he saw Midoriya and Achako passionately making out, he flipped. "We must put a stop to these activities. Such actions are lewd and inappropriate for aspiring young heroes." Todoroki and Bakugo blocked the doorway. "You ain't interrupting shit, Four Eyes. I'm afraid we can't let you ruin this for them." Everyone was shocked that even Bakugo gave enough of a shit to stop Ida. Soon everyone was on his side. "Ida-san, we're all still people and they clearly have a thing for each other, so I don't see how it hurts," Toru said, trying to ease his anger. "Lighten up, Ida-man. It's all natural." Kaminari was trying to coax him, but his nonchalant attitude only made it worse. Ida settled down and said, "Fine, but only because I know Midoriya-kun and Uraraka-san well enough to trust them. The least you can do is show them a little respect and stop spying on them." Everyone left Mina's room and went to the common area to give them some space. They were busy plotting what they were going to say to them when they came down. Everyone was getting super excited to tease the new couple. 8:48 p.m., an hour and 12 minutes before curfew. When the two arrived in the common area, it looked like Midoriya was overtaken by a small tornado or maybe an animal. His clothes were in disarray, his shirt had half of the buttons undone, his tie was loose around his neck, and he had a dark mark just above his collarbone. Ochako bared similar marks on her neck as well, much to the class amusement. Bakugo couldn't help but smirk at him. Midoriya just gave a weak smile back. The class collectively oohed, causing the two of them to blush intensely. Ida was astonished by their appearance. I cannot believe you two, my most trusted friends, would perform such carnal acts while not only on school grounds but in a public place like the roof. Everyone cringed because Midoriya and Ochako had no idea that anybody could see them up there. How much did you see? Uraraka asked. Nobody would say anything. Minda broke the silence. Well, we saw you two making out for what seemed like forever. Apparently, you guys weren't just sucking face. A look of perversion twisted his face into something unsightly. The two of them were extremely embarrassed at this point and didn't know what they could possibly say. Ochako buried her face in her hands to cover up a deep shade of red. Did you use protection? Asked Momo. Her question only amplified their distress. No, we didn't do anything like that, Midoriya frantically responded. The class stared at them with mischievous grins. It made him uneasy about what was to come. Well, if you didn't go all the way, what base did you make it to, Midoriya-san? Kaminari elbowed his buddy in the arm. Izuku froze. Uraraka hasn't uncovered her face since they started teasing them. Mind your own damn business, you nosy brats. They'll do those things when they're ready. Besides, how is it any of our concern, you bastards? Everyone has been blown away by how defensive Katsuki has been over their relationship. Someone normally so full of hatred for Izuku is now defending their privacy. God, Bakugo, you've been so weird about this. Mind telling us why? Tori was curious. He slouched as he walked away. I bet you love romance novels, Bakugo? Kirishima chuckled. Bakugo stopped and twitched violently. Kirishima wasn't wrong, and it was precisely that pissed the king of Explodo kills off. Whatever, he pushed Ajiro out of his way. Move, monkey bastard. Ouch, that was mean. You okay, Ajiro? Kirishima helped him up. Ajiro, are you okay? Tori rushed over. Yeah, I'm fine. He laughed nervously because she was touching his arm. 9:22 p.m., 38 minutes before curfew. Everybody was so focused on Bakugo's outburst that nobody noticed that Izuku and Uraraka had snuck off. They're gone, yelled Mina. You're pretty good at pointing out the obvious, Todoroki coldly responded. Do you think they went back to one of their rooms? Minda wondered. He seemed to be harboring some intense envy. I doubt that. You saw how meek they were at the thought of it, Kyoyuka replied. Fair point, Nedzu said, finally taking part in the conversation. The reality of it was that the stars were out and they decided to go for a walk away from all their teasing classmates. They talked about all sorts of things that had happened since they've met. Things they noticed about each other, things they wished they said sooner, and how they felt when they were apart. It was startling to find out how long they've been crushing on one another. Remember that time you tried to offer your points to me after the entrance exam? Yeah, I was concerned and I thought it was both crazy and sweet that you risked your life to save me. Well, if I can remember right, you called me plain back then, he said, chuckling. Two can explain, that's not what I meant. It's okay, Uraraka-san. I was just wondering, what changed to make you see me in a different light? I can't really explain it. I mean, you don't look much different physically, aside from the fact that I now know your body was sculpted by the gods, she said flirtatiously. She was trying to embarrass him and it was working. Stop it, Uraraka-san, he said, rubbing his neck sheepishly. The more time I spent with you, the more I came to appreciate all your features. The longer I looked, the more I realized you weren't plain at all. Most people fall for someone because of their looks first, and then getting to know the person seals the deal, but it feels like the opposite for me. I mean, you were always handsome, but it wasn't until I got to know you that you suckered me in. You make it sound like I tricked you or something. He couldn't help but laugh as she fumbled her words. Dekukun, no, I don't mean it like that. I swear you just love seeing me flustered. Izuku stopped dead in his tracks. Deku-kun, hold on a second, he said, picking up a sharp rock. He ran towards a tree he saw close to the walkway and carved their initials together in a heart. The act made Uraraka's heart thump. Before he was finished, he felt her arms embrace him from behind. Midoriya, Ochako, what are you doing out after curfew hours? It was Aizawa. He seemed irritated. The two had been talking so long they didn't realize that curfew passed by over half an hour ago. What seemed more surprising was that Ada didn't come track them down first before curfew hit. Midoriya gulped. He didn't know how to explain this to his teacher. Aizawa noticed the carving on the tree and smirked. Midoriya, you know that this is defacing school property, right? Furthermore, you are out after curfew, alone with a girl. I think that's rather inappropriate and you should get back to your rooms immediately before you are dealt punishment. They were surprised at Aizawa's reaction. They expected to be scolded until it was time for class, but they assumed he was feeling generous tonight. Lastly, show some respect and cover your necks. Aizawa shook his head at the two, now red as tomatoes. You have 5 minutes to get back to your rooms or you're both serving house arrest. He left to go back to his office. He asked a security bot to make sure they go back to their dorms but to remain hidden. Isn't that your responsibility, sir? Responded the butt. It's tradition for a man to walk a lady home after a date, so I will not intervene. The two lovebirds were about a 20-minute walk away from the dorms. Sometimes they forgot just how large UA campus is. To save time, Midoriya had an idea. He scooped Uraraka up suddenly, making her squeak with surprise. Hold on tight. Wonder why she didn't even get the words out when he blitzed down the path. She felt comfortable in his strong arms. She wished she could stay there forever, but alas, it was cut short when it only took them 1 minute and 37 seconds to get back to the boarding house. He put her down and they just stared at each other for a while when Midoriya broke the silence. Let me walk you back to your room, he said louder than he intended. Okay, she tried to seem calm, but her mind was a cluster of embarrassing thoughts and her stomach was full of butterflies. They got to her room in just a couple minutes after climbing all the stairs and were now standing in the hallway. I guess I'll see you tomorrow, Uraraka-san. He was running his hands through his hair. She didn't realize she was staring at his frizzy black-green hair, mesmerized, until he snapped her out of it. You, Uraraka-san. Oh, sorry, I spaced out for a second. I'll see you tomorrow. She turned and opened her door. Yeah. Izuku didn't know anything until he was yanked into Uraraka's room by his tie. Izuku stumbled into Uraraka's room baffled. What the hell? He said, confused. It only took a moment for him to realize what was going on. Uraraka was all over him. She was unbuttoning his shirt and he couldn't help but notice her tongue was in his mouth. He didn't know why, but his breathing felt extremely heavy and it sounded like they were both panting. It was like they were underwater and the only way they could breathe was to share oxygen. Midoriya grabbed her thighs and picked her up. Deku-kun, you're so strong. She was loving it. He brought her over to the bed and laid her on her back, leaving her exposed and at his mercy. All this time you've been messing up my clothes, but I think this time the tables have turned. I ain't scared of you. Midoriya couldn't help but chuckle. Your accent, Uraraka. Shut up, she said, covering her mouth, embarrassed. Midoriya took her shirt off and was gently running his lips and tongue across her body. She moaned and groaned softly whenever he reached anywhere sensitive or ticklish. He worked his way towards her bra only to be interrupted by Uraraka reaching to unclip it herself. Don't worry, he said, I got it. With a quick motion, he unclipped her bra and her were exposed. Izuku knew she was voluptuous, but he wasn't quite ready for this. Your confidence a little shaken, Deku-kun, she retorted playfully. She looked at him with raised eyebrows, challenging him. Instead of offering a response, he worked his mouth around Uraraka's. Wow, Deku, that feels amazing. Your mouth is so warm. Just wait, he said triumphantly. The determined look in his eyes sent chills down Achako's spine. She wanted him right then, right there, but he had other plans. He worked his way down her stomach, and down to her waist. The closer he got, the more Uraraka couldn't help but fidget. She was sure she was going to burst before he even did anything. Izuku slid down her skirt to reveal a pretty pink thong with a small heart on the front. He was obviously flustered at the sight of her underwear. Uraraka figured he surmised she'd wear more wholesome panties. She used this opportunity to try and take back control. She turned her body to the side and struck a pose, revealing every curve on her body. Izuku was stunned upon seeing the backside of the thong. What's wrong, Deku-kun? She said teasingly as she got on all fours and looked back at him. She heard him audibly gulp and she thought she had him where she wanted him now. She realized she was wrong when she felt her thong slide down rather abruptly. All her lady parts were exposed to him in such a vulnerable position. Her plan had backfired, she thought. Not that it mattered when she felt the warmth of Deku's tongue press against her. It was one thing that he was pleasing her orally, but in such a naughty position. These thoughts made Uraraka's mind go blank. On Izuku's end, he felt like he was going to drown. She was practically dripping and he noticed her panties, still above her knees, were absolutely soaked. He couldn't help but feel extremely aroused. That feeling made the crotch of his pants feel increasingly tighter by the second. Izuku noticed there was something different. She was squirming even more than before. Deku, I'm gonna. She reached back and grabbed the back of his head, pushing him towards her even more. It surprised Midoriya, but he continued vigorously. Achako felt a surge of pleasure rush through her entire body. This was way better than the things she did alone in her room. After she was finished, she collapsed on her stomach, exhausted. Two of them were drenched in sweat from the activity. Wow, that was something like an exorcism, Izuku joked. Uraraka, still feeling somewhat self-conscious, couldn't help but blush. Shut up, you. Staring at him shirtless, his muscular body glistening with sweat, she couldn't help herself, she wanted more. She looked down and noticed that his manhood was being strangled by the tight fabric of his pants. Izuku observed Uraraka's facial expression change. Her expression shifted from ecstasy to mischievous. It wasn't long before he was making eye contact with her while her face was mere inches away from his groin. What are you doing? You were having so much fun making me wiggle around. I only think it's fair that I do the same to you, Deku-kun. Izuku felt his stress levels skyrocket as she unbuttoned his pants. Like most young men, he was afraid she was going to be disappointed with his size. She pulled down his pants to reveal something she expected anyway. All my boxer briefs, huh? Can't say I didn't expect it, she snickered. Deku was the embodiment of Christmas color. He wished he wore a normal pair of underwear today. More importantly, I never expected you to be packing such a huge one. Its teeth that big. You thought it wasn't. God, I'm sure most boys would love to have something like this. I just thought that the ones I've seen in porn were normal size, so I just figured I was average or something. So, you thought you were average because you compared it to porn. Well yeah, I guess you would fit in with them. She paused for a minute. Deku-kun, I never pegged you for the type who watched porn, she teased. It didn't bother her, most teenage boys did anyway. She just loved the look of panic on his face when he tried to explain himself. Uraraka-san, I don't, well I do, but not very often, and I don't really like it. She couldn't help but giggle at his innocence. I don't mind silly, you won't need it anymore though. He didn't quite understand what she meant until he felt her lips part around the end of his pulsing erection. Uraraka-san, he moaned and panted as she worked him over. Uraraka couldn't believe that here she was, naked with Izuku, with her mouth wrapped around him. She found it hard to take very much given his size, but she still tried her best anyway. Her best was clearly working after all. She was passing with flying colors by all indications. Uraraka-san, where should I? Without removing her lips, she gestured with her finger to her mouth. What? Seriously? His digit popped free as she hushed him, for fear that one of her floormates would hear them doing such an embarrassing thing. The thought only furthered Uraraka's libido. He felt himself on the verge of explosion. An explosion so big that even Kaken would be jealous. Uraraka-san, his entire body tensed up when he called out. Though it was her suggestion, she didn't expect the sheer volume that greeted her. She had intended to get out of it as cleanly as possible, but she couldn't help but allow some to leak down her body. As she was cleaning herself up, she was thinking about Deku's orgasm. She wasn't sure if it was the warmth of the substance, or the consistency, or perhaps it was Izuku's body trembling as he released. She just knew she wanted to experience that again. Izuku, drained, turned to look at his lover. She spread her legs in front of Izuku and beckoned him sheepishly. His face felt unbearably hot looking at her in such a position. She giggled as he stiffened up once again within seconds. That's when it dawned on them they had no condoms. Uraraka whined, "Nuo, seriously. I'm sorry, I just didn't think about it before this," and then it hit him. There was someone he could ask. He wasn't sure, however, if he really wanted to. Midoriya half-assed putting his clothes on. He forgot about his tie, didn't do up any of the buttons on his shirt, and was hauling on his sneakers as he ran down the hall. He didn't care, his princess was waiting for him. When he told her that he knew of someone he could ask, she looked excited, that was, until he said Minta's name. Minta. She retched at the thought of the little perv. He leaned in and gave her a, "I'll just be a minute, Uraraka-san." Okay, she sighed. She wanted him to hurry back and she didn't care where he got them. When he got to the bottom floor of the girls' dorm, he looked to see if the coast was clear. "Full cow," he whispered, boosting himself across the distance within just a couple seconds. He wasn't sure exactly how loud he was knocking on Minta's door, but he really didn't care. Midoriya had more important things to worry about. Minta opened the door groggily. "Midoriya-san, what the hell are you doing here? Do you know what time it is?" Then Minta took the time to look him up and down. His shirt was open and grape juice couldn't but notice Midoriya looked like he just walked off a paintball field minus the paint. "Minta, I need say no more. I understand why you're here. No protection, right?" He smirked devilishly. "Yes, how did you know?" Midoriya's naivety was on full display. "I just have an eye for these things, I suppose. Anyway, come on in." Midoriya didn't like his sinister demeanor. Nonetheless, he couldn't forget what he came for. "Now tell me why on earth I should give up some of my stash to the likes of you." "What the hell do you mean?" "I mean, you stole the second cutest girl in the class away from me. You think I'd just let that slide steal her away from you? I didn't do any such thing, second cutest." "Well, you narrowed my options, you bastard. She was my backup in case things didn't work out with Momo," he said, trying to hold back a tear. "Here you are getting fawned over by the girls. You wouldn't understand self-sufficient guys like me. Just this once, Minta. Is there anything we can work out?" Okay. Take pictures of Uraraka for me." Izuku smacked him upside the head. "No, you asshole. Some panties then." "No. Details." "No. Well, you then, man, good luck finding some condoms around here." "Fine." Midoriya got up to leave. "It's not fair." Minta stopped him. "For that time you saved me at USJ, you can take one." "Seriously?" He was ecstatic. "Knock yourself out," he said, pulling out a drawer cram-packed with several brands of condoms. The sheer volume of latex in the drawer astonished Izuku. Izuku never bought condoms before, so he had no idea what he should use. He recalled Uraraka telling him to get a bigger condom, because average ones probably wouldn't fit him and they didn't want it to break. He didn't want to ask Minta for a recommendation because that's awkward as hell. "What's the matter? Hurry it up, Midoriya-san." Then he pieced it together. "You've never used condoms before, huh?" "Well, I've never had any need to. Most of these should work for most guys. I don't think that they'll work for me though." He couldn't look Minta in the eye. "Okay then. What extreme are we going?" He was surprised he was keeping his cool. I guess he really was trying to help him out. Upper extreme, I guess. "I hate you." "What?" "I hate you. These are the ones you'll probably want." He hauled out a whole box of American Magnum condoms. "I thought I only got one. They're no good to me," he said, his head hanging in shame. "Thanks, Minta, you're the best dude." He took off out the door and down the stairs. That lucky son of a. All he had to do now was stealthily make his way back to Uraraka's room. He did the same as before, scoped out his surroundings before stepping outside, activated full cowl, and dashed. He only jumped 2 meters. My quick didn't activate, he thought before he had an epiphany. Oh shit, a familiar person was standing in his way. Busted. Izuku was in front of the boys' dorm. His shirt was open, he was peppered with hickeys, and he was carrying a box of condoms in his hand. This was all the evidence Aizawa needed to bring down the hammer. Midoriya, I feel as though we had this conversation a couple of hours ago, he began. You are out well after curfew, dressed inappropriately, carrying devices used during intercourse which is unacceptable amongst young students like yourselves. Return to your room at once. We will discuss your punishment in class tomorrow morning. How did you know? Izuku gulped, waiting for a reaction. Aizawa sighed. If you must know, I assigned a security bot to follow you back to the dorm so that you could walk your Uraraka back yourself while also being supervised. The bot informed me you hadn't come out of the female dorm for quite some time, so I made a fair assumption you were performing forbidden acts on campus. Izuku could clearly see Eraserhead was beyond pissed. He went back to his room without another word as he was told, trying to avoid further punishment. Izuku flung himself onto his bed. He was so disappointed in himself. He took out his phone to text Uraraka. She was still naked under the covers when she heard her phone buzz. Deku, yeah, I got a box of condoms but got busted by Aizawa. I am so sorry, Uraraka-san. She was really disappointed they weren't going to get any further. She was actually kind of mad at Eraserhead for being such a block. Uraraka, it's okay, Deku-kun. What did he say? Deku, he said he'll discuss my punishment in class tomorrow. I think he intends to make an example of me in the class. Uraraka, it could always be worse. You could have gotten expelled. Deku, don't jinx it for the love of God. Uraraka, sorry lol. Did he confiscate the condoms though? Deku, fortunately, no. I doubt we'll get to use them though. We're probably going to be under intense watch. Uraraka, Aizawa anyway. They texted back and forth like this for the rest of the night. They couldn't help but long for each other, but this was the best they could do given the circumstances. Midoriya couldn't help but fret thinking about what was coming his way. He wouldn't know what to do if he got expelled from his dream high school. He'd miss everyone in his class, especially Uraraka-san. Of all the stupid things he's done, he knew this was the dumbest. Neither Midoriya or Uraraka got any sleep last night. The effects, anyhow, were evident only in Uravity. Izuku was far too tense, worrying about what was to come for him. He couldn't lift his head from his desk as he impatiently waited for Aizawa-sensei to show himself and bestow unfathomable punishment. The class were gossiping amongst themselves, trying to analyze the situation. Minda bragged that he knew what was going on but refused to tell anybody. Come on man, you gotta share that info. Kaminari was unbearably curious, as were his classmates. No way I was entrusted with this secret because I am the better man, he couldn't help but gloat to his friends. Mina walked over to interrupt their conversation. I tried getting some information out of Yura but no dice. Aoyama walked into the classroom with a sparkle. The class forgot that he was gone on vacation with his parents to France. Bonjour mon amis, he stopped and looked around the classroom, immediately picking out Midoriya and Uraraka from the crowd. It smells as though there is drama in the air. He picked up on that awful fast. Denki shrugged. Yuga interrupted the girls' gossip circle with a sparkle. Do tell, I'm afraid we don't know much. Kyoyuka shrugged. Midoriya-kun and Uraraka finally got together, but it seems something happened that none of us know about. C'est triste, alas, young Midoriya-kun and Uraraka-sen have reached an impasse. Most the class sighed at Aoyama's flamboyant demeanor. It was no trouble to tell he was back. Neither of the couple acknowledged him, or anybody else for that matter. The door slid open, and as Aizawa-sensei walked in, Midoriya eyed him intently. This is it, Izuku whispered under his breath. Settle down, class. It's too early in the morning for your noise. He looked at his two pupils whom he had scolded last night. Last night, he began. 2 students in this class showed an inherent disregard for the rules. The entire class turned to look at the young couple. Their skin was tinged red with embarrassment. I was disappointed in their behavior and as a result decided to deal the corresponding punishment. What punishment, however, I was unsure of. After pondering overnight, I came up with a reasonable act of discipline. Midoriya and Ochako, he glared down his students. You were responsible for the upkeeping of the east and west sides of campus respectively for the next week. The entire campus. The class was blown away by the punishment. Isn't that a little extreme? Todoroki couldn't help but ask. Aizawa's intention was to keep them apart while also having them work so hard physically that they would lack the energy to pursue any frivolous experimentation. Let this be an example for those who attempt to further stretch the rules. You may all be aspiring heroes, gifted with powerful abilities, but in the end, a lack of respect for the law makes you no better than criminals. Eraserhead stopped for a moment. I had intended to take the day to teach you stealth capture techniques. The class looked up at him excitedly. Aizawa-sensei was a master of capturing criminals under the guise of night, and it would be amazing to learn some of his skills. But since Midoriya and Ochako took it upon themselves to learn anatomy last night, today you must sit through a series of movies known as The Miracle of Life. The couple felt like their classmates' hateful gaze burned holes through their faces. Neither of them could bring themselves to look at their teacher or their classmates. It was one thing to be dealt this kind of punishment, but for him to openly make an example and embarrass them both in front of the class. It felt awful. If there was any silver lining Midoriya could take from this, it was that neither of them were expelled. Aizawa left the room to retrieve the tapes, leaving the two to be bombarded by questions and statements. Deku, you idiot, you just couldn't keep it in your goddamn pants, could ya? I trusted you both. I should have stopped you when I had intended. I am glad that Aizawa-sensei has dealt you a befitting punishment for such heinous acts. I do not deserve to be the heir to the ingenium name for turning a blind eye to such a thing. Sheesh, you should have known this would happen if you acted carelessly, moron, said Momo. Not everybody was dealing their harsh criticisms. Some were more concerned with the details of the night before. Come on, Midoriya, you gotta tell us what happened between you two last night. Yes, please tell us. Denki and Minda have no shame, do they? Kyoyuka slouched. I must say, mademoiselle, that I too am interested in what happened last night. Do tell. Aoyama was bugging Uraraka, who had no intentions of speaking. Kirishima just patted Midoriya on the back. You're a real man, Midoriya-san. We never really considered you two as the type to do such a thing, honestly, Fumikage said stoically. Yeah, I always assumed it would be Kaminari and Kyoyuka slapped Mina's mouth shut. Don't you dare, she said angrily. Kaminari looked in their direction, only having heard his name. He shrugged it off and continued pestering Midoriya. Upon Aizawa's return, the class immediately sat back in their seats. Thus, they began their movie marathon as they learned about the birds, the bees, and the miracle of childbirth. Immediately after class, Uraraka and Midoriya were greeted with a list each. These lists detailed the various aspects of the campus they would have to clean and maintain. These lists were no joke, mind you. It would take a normal person several days to complete each list. The young couple, however, only had until curfew to complete theirs. Following successful completion of the list, you will be met with a new list with different tasks tomorrow, and so on and so forth until your punishment has been served. What happens if we can't complete it before curfew? Uraraka was asking from a place of pure innocence. The answer was a bitter pill for the two lovebirds to swallow. If you cannot complete all the tasks on time, he grinned sinisterly, you must add your remaining tasks onto the following day's list. Failure to complete all tasks before the end of the week results in your failure of this term. Failure. Midoriya couldn't help but feel a flash of apprehension. He tried internalizing this dreadful feeling, but he was sure that his distress was leaking through his expression. Nonetheless, he tried to maintain an undaunted composure that would act as solace for Uraraka-san. He noticed a while ago that she always looked to him during stressful times. Now that he understood her feelings, he knows that she looks to him for strength. He had to be her anchor. This realization added infinite duress to his swirling cesspool of emotion. Midoriya slapped his cheeks, causing them to turn a rosy red. This action prompted perplexed looks from both Uraraka-san and Aizawa-sensei, but that didn't matter. I will not fail this challenge. I will not fall, nor will I waver. Let the products of my hard labor prove themselves at the end of this week. Aizawa was pleasantly astounded at his conviction. Very well. Report back to me in a week. That was awesome, Deku-kun. She couldn't help but feel admiration for him. This was the way he always was. During moments of strife, he was a shining ray of light that instilled resolve in all those around him. That was one of the qualities she fell in love with. She decided that she would not fail either. Upon seeing Aizawa turn the corner, Midoriya's legs gave out from under him. They were wet noodles that he managed to uphold only by channeling images of his hero All Might in his mind. We're so screwed, he whimpered. He felt a soft touch on his shoulder. Deku-kun. We can do this, we must. She felt like his hero after seeing the way he stared at her. She watched as his dreamy green eyes lit up at her encouragement. She could hardly contain the butterflies as their gazes met, but she had no choice for the time being. Uraraka-sen, we'll figure this out. He held her hands in his firmly, causing her to blush. There isn't anything in this world that would keep me from you. Just another moment where Deku-kun makes my world stand still. She was used to it by now, but she never stopped lavishing in the feeling even now, as they were faced with an insurmountable challenge. With words of assurance solidifying their resolve, they set out to complete the ridiculous punishment. Midoriya's first task found him in the support workshop. As soon as he stepped foot inside, Hatsume was all over him. Are you here to see my babies? What do you need? Jetpack, arm cannon, grappling hook, shoe phone, she asked diligently, throwing the items behind her head in sequence. She looked up from her pile to find that Midoriya had only cracked a nervous smile. That last one was a joke, you know. You could laugh. She got up in his business as she always did. If there was one thing about Hatsume that made Midoriya uncomfortable, it was the fact that she had a habit of pressing her body against his when she was excited about something. It obviously wasn't intimate, but as a teenage boy, he couldn't help but feel discomfort when her chest pressed against him in a thin tank top. He learned immediately that she doesn't like wearing bras either, as there was no stability in her whenever she leaned on him. Thinking back, he could distinctly remember Uraraka shooting very condescending looks at the pink-haired girl. He was only now realizing that they were probably looks of envy, which he found adorable. He had to tease her about that when he saw her later. Power Loader, pro hero and teacher at UA, interrupted Hatsume's unsightly behavior to explain Midoriya's presence. Midoriya-kun, I am glad that you are here. You read the list so you know what's in store for you, correct? Yeah, I have to organize and store Hatsume's pile, right? He cringed as he gawked at the ever-growing mountain of trinkets and gadgets. He swears it was 3 times larger than the last time he saw it. Thank goodness for that. Her pile is beginning to encroach on necessary areas of the workshop. Of course, Hatsume was far too affectionate regarding her inventions, so she refused to slim down her inventory. She furrowed her brow. Why would I allow anybody to throw my babies away? Power Loader sighed. I suggest you get a move on if you don't want to fall behind in your duties, Midoriya-kun. Midoriya looked at the time. 5:45 p.m. Already, he had a hunch he'd be missing his meals today, but that's the price he had to pay. Rather than waste any more time, he activated Full Cowl and got to work. This punishment was an excellent way for him to test his stamina limits when using Full Cowl. With that, a silver lining to all this madness was revealed. Uraraka was first tasked with the collection and storage of the physical education class gear. Ting was tasked with her supervision. He was appalled by her happy-go-lucky method that involved her zero-gravity quirk. Uraraka spent more time doing intense exercises than actually performing the task. Things weren't looking great on her end. She was falling behind and she was hungry too. I wonder how Deku-kun is making out. She paused for a moment. Making out Deku-kun. Her face twisted in perversion. She had to forcefully snap herself out of her sensual daydream with a quick slap to her own face. Gotta stay focused, she said as she ran off to complete her next task. 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes before curfew. Midoriya and Uraraka showed up in the common area. Their clothes were covered with dirt and grime, their skin glistened with sweat, and they both exasperatedly gasped for air while their class watched. Uraraka-san, how did you do? Midoriya asked between breaths. I have one thing left on today's list. You? She panted for air. I just finished the last thing. What do you have left? His breathing was starting to regulate. Something about finding Midnight Sensei's cat. Her fitness levels were well behind her sculpted boyfriend, so she was still trying to catch her breath. Find her cat. How is that upkeeping the damn campus? You know what? I really don't know. Their classmates were stunned at the fact that neither of them had acknowledged any of their presence. They were so caught up in their debacle that they had forgotten their classmates existed. After listening to their goofy conversation for a while, the class began to laugh one after another. It drew the couple's attention. God, you guys are something else. Kaminari wrapped his arms around the two only to be discouraged by their dirty clothing. This prompted laughter from the girls in the class, especially Kyoyuka. So, I heard you went to the workshop, Midoriya-san. Did you see Hatsum? Maida asked with drool falling out of his mouth. The air surrounding Uraraka burned with an intense jealousy. Yes, Deku-kun, did you see Hatsum? He scrambled to try and get his words together. And no, I didn't. I mean I did, but I ignored her when she was. When she was what? He was in deep shit and he knew it. Please help me. He turned to his classmates pleadingly. He muttered an I hate you towards Maida, who only grinned goofily in response. Yura-san, you know he wouldn't do something like that to you. Mina tried to lighten the tension. Yeah, I guess you're right, Mina-san. Midoriya got on his knees at Mina's feet. Thank you so much. Uraraka couldn't help but roll her eyes and smile at him. He was just too damn cute for his own good. I recommend you both shower and head straight to bed. It's time for curfew, everyone, Ida exclaimed, trying to get the ball rolling on Lights Out. Everyone groaned at his disposition, but that wasn't about to budge him. After everybody began returning to their rooms for the night, Midoriya and Uraraka went to their respective showers. The students were pretty disappointed that they didn't have their own showers in their rooms. They found it strange that showers were in the common area. Of course, the men and women had different showers, but it was still shared with their peers. This layout meant less privacy, and for some, that was a bad thing. Uraraka turned on the hot water and let it trickle down her soft, pale skin. It was almost as if she was allowing the water to rinse away the desperation and anxiety she had felt throughout the day. Uraraka had thought common showers were a bad thing, but her opinion quickly changed when she felt a familiar hand on her back. She shuddered at his soft touch. He touched her as if she were made of porcelain and the slightest slip would shatter her. His hands wandered, exploring every curve and contour of her body, as if memorizing the properties of her skin. All of her senses were fixated on his every movement. She couldn't focus on account of the cautious grazing of his teeth and lips along her neck. She whimpered as he took her skin between his teeth, sucking sensually. One of his hands had trailed to her, the other was still searching patiently for its destination. He made gentle circling and folding motions over her puffy, pink nipple, earning moans of gratification from his lover. Even though they were taking a hot shower, nothing compared to the blistering heat of his breath brushing against her right earlobe. She tried to call out to him, but her mouth simply remained agape. She eventually managed to force the words, albeit with some difficulty. Deku-kun, she trailed off. Her breathing was getting hot and heavy. Her breathing only became more so as she felt his other hand draw closer to its stop. His fingers curled around her inner thigh and crept along her skin, sending tingles up her spine. He was whispering something in her ear, but she couldn't quite make sense of his words. She was too busy indulging herself in forbidden pleasures to understand. She jumped as she pieced together his sentence. His fingers found their way to her moist and aching folds. Her body pressed against the cold stall as his digits rubbed at her flower, further stimulating her. Her eyes rolled back into her head as he increased his intensity. That was when he stopped suddenly, prompting her to look back at him with a what gives expression. She turned to face her lover, who was bearing a face she had never seen before. His face was draped with a smug grin that made her weak in the knees. He was proud, borderline conceited, at the way his touch made her melt. He was relishing in it, and she found it undeniably why that it was a look reserved only for her. Midoriya took the initiative and pressed Uraraka's back up against the wall. His tongue tickled her bottom lip, practically begging for entry. As they deepened their hands were glued to each other. They held each other like their lives depended on it. When they parted, both of them were panting heavily, only to bring together their flushed faces again shortly after. A more sympathetic look crossed Midoriya's face, which piqued Uraraka's curiosity. "What's wrong, Deku-kun? Are you sure you want to go any further?" She thought it was adorable that he was concerned. Both of them were and while the echoes of girls complaining about their first time picked her mind, it didn't outweigh her desire to be with Deku. "Yes, I'm sure. I need you, Deku-kun." His new expression was one she was quite familiar with. As hot as his arrogant look was, his genuine smile affected her in a way that couldn't be explained with words. He reached for the condoms he left in the corner of the stall and ripped open the packaging. It was obvious he hadn't used a condom before. He fumbled as he attempted to put it on. Uraraka couldn't help but laugh, causing Midoriya to blush and hang his head down in shame. "Here, let me," she giggled at his innocence. She got on her knees and slid the XL condom he borrowed from their perverted friend Minda over his manhood. She gave him a playful smack and squeeze on his firm ass afterward, causing him to jump sheepishly. She giggled and gave him another squeeze as he groaned. She laid out across the shower floor and spread her legs, inviting him between them. He settled into position, angling himself and propping himself up on one outstretched arm while his other guided him. His large prick was now knocking on her door. He looked at her again, his gaze asking for her permission. She said no word, she simply nodded. He slowly moved his head in and out of her wet heat, watching her wince in pain with each movement. He grabbed his face cloth and handed it to her. "I want you to bite down on this." She complied, and Midoriya looked away from her, afraid her expression would halt what he was about to do. With a deep breath, he penetrated her heat. She bit down hard onto the face cloth, and he could see small tears rolling down her cheeks. He did not move for a while, allowing her to adjust to his size and allowing the pain to wear off. "God, I should have picked somebody with a small for my first time," she joked with a shaky voice. It received a nervous laugh from her boyfriend. "You okay?" he had to ask before he pursued any further. The last thing he wanted to do was hurt her. She paused for a couple minutes, sifting through her feelings, before determining if he could move yet. "Okay, you should be okay to move, but slow, please." He nodded in comprehension as his hips began to rock back and forth slowly. She still occasionally gasped and winced in pain, but her expressions were getting less frequent and concerning. They had been so focused on their actions that they forgot all about the hot water trickling between their bodies. Closing the space between them was the only thing that occupied their minds. His thrusts were slow and she couldn't take any more than half of his length, but they both moaned softly in unison. He began increasing the speed of his thrusts as her walls began to accommodate him. He latched his lips onto hers, muffling their lustful sounds. The two lovers were lost in ecstasy when they heard the door open. They both froze where they were. They had no idea who it was, but they couldn't help but freak out. "Yura-sen," and here it was Mina. Uraraka knew she had to answer because the water was left running. She cursed herself for not turning the water off. "Yeah, I am." "Oh, I see. You've been in here a while. Are you thinking about something?" "I guess, I don't know." She was just trying to divert any suspicions Mina may have. "Why are you in here?" "I feel kind of stuffy. I think I'm catching a cold, so I figured some steam would do me great." "That sucks. I hope you don't pass it on to me." Uraraka felt relief that her friend had no idea that she was lying on the shower stall floor, with Deku-kun's huge penis penetrating her womanhood. She thought they were in the clear until she felt movement. What possessed him, he wasn't sure. He couldn't help but feel hot and overwhelmed at the thought of being and almost getting caught. He wasn't going to pass on this opportunity, and he felt Uraraka's entire body convulse with his sudden thrust. She clasped her mouth shut, fearful of allowing any muffled sounds to escape from her lips. Uraraka was mad that he continued without warning her, but she had no desire to stop him. To make matters worse, Mina continued talking to Uraraka, unaware of what was transpiring on the other side of the stall. Uraraka knew she'd have to uncover her mouth and answer her friend to avoid any suspicions. "How are you finding Aizawa-sensei's punishment?" "It's pretty hot." Midoriya latched his lips onto her nipple and she squeaked. "You okay, Yura-sen?" "Yeah, I almost slipped is all." Mina laughed. "Be more careful then, dumbass." Uraraka couldn't believe that this was working. What if Mina was just playing it cool and she actually knew? Nina probably wouldn't be able to embarrass them by confronting them, knowing her. She was trying to convince herself they were safe while simultaneously trying to avoid letting herself slip into the well of pleasure Deku was pushing her towards. Deku-kun's actions were ravaging her insides. She felt herself getting closer and closer to orgasm. She tried everything to coax herself down, but she knew it was inevitable. She felt far too hot and bothered to distract herself. As pressure built up in her core, her responses to Mina were becoming less and less frequent and filled with pauses. She did this to collect herself, but she worried that her friend would catch on to them at this rate. Midoriya had leaned back and continued to thrust into her. He moved to this position so that he could place his thumb on her most sensitive area. As Uraraka felt the sudden pressure on her button, she had to cover her mouth with her hand to contain a heavy moan. She was sure some of it leaked into the room. "Are things between you and Midoriya-sen going well?" "Better than you could possibly imagine," she thought. "Yeah, we were kind of off-put by the punishment, but we decided to try and figure things out." "That's great. Everyone always noticed the way you looked at each other, but we think it's awesome that things finally worked out for you too. Do you have any plans for the weekend?" Nina got no response for quite some time. She had no idea that Uraraka was on the other side of the stall, nails dug into Midoriya's back, containing what had been the hardest orgasm she had ever experienced. It was torture not to be able to let all her pleasure spill out from her mouth, but she somehow managed kept it confined. Midoriya had come at the same time, back arched like a cat. He could barely control his heavy panting. He gave Uraraka a light peck on the lips and pulled out, revealing a condom full of his spunk. Midoriya decided to grab his things in the corner of the stall where it was dry and take off before Mina was finished with her shower. He wrapped his towel around his waist and slowly opened the stall door. Thankfully, any noise he made was drowned out by the sounds of the shower. He ran out of the girls' shower room and headed back towards his room. Uraraka just sat there on the floor for a couple of minutes trying to regain her composure. When she got out of the shower, Mina had as well. Mina noticed her skin looked really flush, especially around her chest and neck. "Just how hot did you have your water, Uraraka? Did you burn yourself?" Uraraka took a moment to realize what her friend had said. Her mind was still overloaded with pleasure. "And I know, I just love hot showers. That's all. Where I have a pale complexion, it makes it look like I'm burned." She knew she sounded nervous, but she's sure that she threw Mina off their trail. "Oh, I gotcha with my skin complexion. I'd never noticed something like that." The two girls got their things together and walked back to their rooms. The fact Mina hadn't caught on only aroused Uraraka more. Her slit was still aching from losing her ID, but she still couldn't deny the fact that that was the most pleasure she had ever felt, and she hoped it would happen again. The next morning, both Midoriya and Uraraka seemed to have an incandescent glow about them. The class couldn't help but take notice. The class couldn't comprehend how they could be so chipper. They still had to serve 6 more days of punishment at the hands of Aizawa-sensei, yet they were beaming. Suspicion brewed amongst their classmates, and being teenagers, they couldn't resist the temptation of uncovering their dirty little secrets. Yo Midoriya, Kirishima walked up and patted him on the back. "How are you feeling today? Tired after all that hard work yesterday, I'm sure." Midoriya laughed confidently, which his class found off-putting. Confidence and Midoriya just didn't seem to mix. Nervous, anxious, jittery, these were all words that came to mind when Midoriya was in question. Sure, he was great with coming through during a pinch, but his sudden change in attitude practically spelled out that something was going on. "Yeah, it was pretty tough, but I gave it my all and managed to complete yesterday's list. Hopefully, I can do the same today." He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. He immediately caught himself in his fit of zealousness and decided to tone it down before someone picked up on it. He didn't realize, however, that he was too late. "Oi, Deku, what's with that dumbass grin you're sporting today?" Everyone knew that Bakugo wasn't a chump. He could read through situations better than some of the most analytical individuals, despite being both egocentric and impatient. The thought of Bakugo figuring him out sent chills through his spine, and he quickly reverted to his usual self. "And then nothing, Kaken," he stuttered and quivered at his aggression. I am sorry." He bowed his head so fast he actually slammed it on his desk. This prompted everyone to look in his direction, embarrassing him. He wouldn't lift his head to reveal his red cheeks or the imprint of his desk on his forehead. Kaminari shrugged. "Guess he hasn't changed a bit." The guys laughed. The girls were busy trying to snatch up some juicy gossip from the radiant Uraraka before homeroom. It was to no avail because Uraraka simply gave them the runaround in her answers. "So, you mean to tell me that you're just in a good mood today?" Uraraka-san, Kyoyuka asked suspiciously. "Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I be?" Uraraka furrowed her brow sassily. "You seemed utterly exhausted last night, and you didn't go to bed until really late, Ura-san. I don't understand how you have so much energy." "I'm drained, and I went to bed at the same time, and I didn't have to do that crazy list." The girls all agreed that Mina had a legitimate point and wanted to pursue further. Before they could do so, Aizawa-sensei made his entrance. "Geez, do you kids realize that it's too early for your optimism?" He looked at his two victims and felt as though something was off. They seemed just a little too happy for his liking. Their appearance should be more akin to mine. He was referring to his lazy demeanor and his lifeless eyes. He decided that he would look into it at a later time, as he had more important things to worry about. Class ended for the day, and their classmates still had questions that wanted answers to. Most notable was that the two of them kept stealing glances at each other over the course of the whole day, and there was a different kind of tension between them. Everyone in the room could feel it. Aizawa handed both teenagers their lists for the day. The list had at least an additional 10 tasks from yesterday's list, much to their dismay. "Problem?" he asked them with a smirk playing at his lips. He thought if he tweaked their punishment a bit, it would snuff out any lingering flames of passion. "And no, not at all," Midoriya chimed as he scanned his list top to bottom. "This is getting absurd," he thought, but if it was the path to becoming a hero, then so be it. He was just worried he'd eventually suffer the ramifications trying to have his cake and eat it too. When his dirty teenage mind made the cake analogous to Uraraka-san, his face lit up a deep shade of red. Aizawa simply pegged it as panic due to his extended list of duties and shrugged it off. "Get to it if you want to beat curfew," he called as he walked away. "God, this sucks," Uraraka pouted, looking over at Midoriya. He couldn't help but admire her cute cheeks. It made her look so undeniably adorable, and he just wanted to plaster them with ease. "It'll be okay, Uraraka-san." He shot her a weak smile that was so contagious that she could help but return it. There was so much they wanted to say and do to each other, but with so many prying eyes and ears they had to try and remain as discreet as possible. A couple of their classmates were hiding behind a large tree not far from the couple, trying desperately to eavesdrop, hoping for even a little bit of information. They couldn't hear anything, but they noticed that Uraraka leaned close to Midoriya and said something that made him turn a whole other shade of red they'd never seen before, and his body stiffened like a board. "So, Deku-kun, are we meeting in the showers tonight or not?" she smiled lustfully at her question. Midoriya was shivering at how close she was in the gentle warmth of her breath against the side of his face. "Aye. You sound like a broken record," she giggled. "I'll see you this evening, Deku-kun." She gave him a big smile and waved lovingly as she walked away. Over behind the tree, the group was distraught. "No hug, no anything," Mineta exclaimed in disappointment. "We should've taken Shaoji. That never work. He's just way too bulky," Kaminari retorted. "I guess they just don't want to show in public displays of affection, especially since they are in such big trouble with Aizawa-sensei," Toru replied. Didn't stop the two of them from coming down from the roof looking like a newlywed couple after a night of drinking. Kaminari couldn't help but laugh at his own words. "I mean, at least they have some shame now," sighed Toru. "Oh, hush, Toru. Lusty fun is the best fun." Mina pumped her fist in approval. Mineta rejoiced only to be punched by Toru. "You're siding with Mineta, Mina. You should be ashamed of yourself." They all laughed and went back to their dorms. A strong sense of deja vu rushed over their friends as the couple repeated their endo-fide encounter from last evening almost identically. It earned the hearty laughter of their peers. They looked over in curiosity. "What's so funny, guys?" Midoriya asked, still panting heavily. The class just waved dismissively, implying that it wasn't important. "Oh, and I still haven't found Midnight Sensei's cat." "Still, and how is that even a chore?" "Don't know. I hate to interrupt your comedic display," you two Eda chimed in. "It is quite close to curfew and I suggest that you clean up and then lights out. Also, Midoriya-san, may I have a word with you for a moment?" Midoriya tried his best to swallow his anxiety as he walked into the hallway with his friend. "Where were you last night?" "Where was I? I showered and went to bed." "What time did you start showering?" "I don't know, around 10 p.m. I guess." I waited for you on our floor last night." Midoriya felt the bead of sweat trickle down his face. "You mean to tell me that you showered for at least an hour and 17 minutes? Midoriya looked up at him puzzled. "An hour and 17 minutes. That was how long I waited before deciding I needed to get some rest myself." "Oh, that is a gross misuse of water, Midoriya-san. It is both costly and harmful to the environment. Behave a little more responsibly next time." Midoriya sighed a breath of relief at this statement. He thanked God that Ida was so pure that he hadn't considered any lewd possibilities. "I'm sorry, Ida-san, it won't happen again." "Good." Ida's expression was still serious as he walked past him. Midoriya felt a firm hand on his shoulder as he walked by. It was a hand of disappointment. Ada knows. Uraraka was laying in bed after another long day when she heard her phone buzz. Before looking, she had hoped it was Deku-kun saying he'll be right over for another night of lusty fun, or at least a picture of him in all his glory. She drooled at the thought. Snapping herself out of it, she looked at her phone. "Midoriya, Uraraka-san, I think that Ada knows." "Uraraka, what do you mean he knows how?" "Midoriya, maybe I'm being paranoid, but when he talked to me in the hallway he told me he waited up for me for a while before going to bed. He touched my shoulder as he walked away, and I don't know for sure, but it felt like he knew." "Uraraka, what are we gonna do?" Ida is so straight and narrow, he'll probably tell Aizawa-sensei. "Oh god." "Midoriya, I don't know, he'll figure something out." "Uraraka, okay." A brief pause before she typed her next message. "Uraraka, Deku-kun." "Midoriya, yeah." "Uraraka, if you aren't coming over tonight, can you at least give me something to get by?" If she could have seen him, then she would have seen a shade of red that rivaled her own. She received no response for a while and speculated she scared him off, but was also hopeful that he'd show up at her door any minute. Her phone buzzed, breaking her out of her trance. "Midoriya, would this do?" Upon looking at the picture, she flailed back onto her bed with a stream of erupting from her nose. There he was, package in hand, laid out across his bed so wily. She debated taking the risk and sneaking over to his room, but managed to build up the willpower to resist. "Uraraka, I think it will." "God, he thought she kills me." "Midoriya, so, where's my reward?" No response. He assumed she couldn't contain herself and went straight at it. He was flattered that she felt that way about him, and it was a real confidence boost. It definitely made up for his shit life up to this point. His phone buzzed. "Uraraka, I left it by your door." Midoriya, he looked over at his closed door wondering how, when, and what. He decided to haul on a pair of basketball shorts just in case anybody saw him open his door with his junk bare to the wind. He twisted the knob and he was beginning to feel anxious for some reason. He had no idea what was on the other side of that door or if he'd even be prepared for it. He wasn't. Uraraka was on the other side of his door wearing nothing but a thin silk robe that was left nothing to the imagination. He almost passed out on the spot. She tackled him and simultaneously closed the door with her foot. They hoped that it wasn't loud enough to stir any of his slumbering floormates. "Uraraka-san, what are you doing here?" he managed to get out between breaths. It was hard to speak with a tongue in his mouth. "I couldn't help myself. I saw that picture and I don't know, masturbating whilst about to cut it." He stifled a small laugh. "What's so funny, huh?" "And nothing. Tell me. You're just cute, I guess." Yes, she furrowed her brow at his statement. "Not what I meant, and not what I meant at all. I know, I'm just messing with you." She stuck her tongue out at him playfully. She leaned in while straddling him on the floor. He could feel her shaky breathing against his ear, and it sent shivers down his spine. "What happened to all that bravado you had the other night, Deku-kun?" She nibbled his ear and he almost jumped. 2. She put her fingers to his lips. It was her turn to rock the boat tonight. The boat being Deku-kun's bed, of course. She sat him on his bed and smirked mischievously. She noticed that when she tackled him, his shorts slid down partway, revealing a defined V that led to her happy place. It took everything in her to maintain her composure and not get flustered at the sight. She had to keep the pace or head take over like last time and embarrass her. She loved getting manhandled last time, but she wanted to make him aware that she could do the handling as well. She yanked at the waistband of his shorts. "Off," she commanded, within inches of his face. He complied with so much urgency that she had to choke down a giggle. He's so goddamn adorable, she thought. His member popped free with such force that it flicked against his abs after being set free from the elastic of his waistband. She took the shorts from around his ankles and fired them across the room, shooting him a "Ya want Benedicto Sanamor" look. He clasped his mouth shut to contain a moan as he felt her soft lips part around his head. He'll never get used to this feeling, he thought to himself, reveling in the pleasure that was Uraraka-san's mouth. He was supporting himself on his outstretched arms, but as the fellatio progressively got more intense, his arms became inversely weaker. He leaned back and propped himself up on his elbows. His sudden shift in position popped us free from Uraraka's mouth. The brunette looked at him with impish eyes. She ran her tongue from the head of his penis to the base of his balls and then back up again. He grunted and moaned, not even trying to smother out his primal noises. He knew it was pointless. "What's wrong, Deku-kun?" she asked as she lubed up his shaft with her saliva. She was in ecstasy watching his expressions change with each stroke, with each gentle suck, with each lick. If she had been wearing panties, she was certain they'd be a darker shade. Midoriya felt himself nearing climax, and he wasn't ready to be spent just yet. He used all the strength he had to sit upright and grab Uraraka's cheeks. She gave him a surprised expression and he pulled her in for a deep. Her assertive facade had been broken, and once again she was at the mercy of that side of Deku-kun that only she knew. He reached for the pack of condoms in his nightstand and unwrapped it. He was far better at sheathing his weapon this time around. Uraraka was impressed at how quickly he picked it up. "You were practicing, weren't you?" she smiled at him slyly. He just shot her a weak smile in response as he laid on the bed. She wondered what he was doing. By now head of me pinned to the mattress, what gives, she thought. He looked at her with confident, strong eyes that made her inside scream at her. "Are you going to me, or not?" His actions drove her crazy. She doesn't even remember how she got there, but the next that she knew she was straddling Deku-kun, about to guide his hardened inside of her longing folds. He grabbed the strand of silk that held her robe together and loosened it, revealing Uraraka's curvaceous body. The sudden cold draft made her nipples pucker and twitch, much to Midoriya's amusement. She leaned down to passionately him as she slid him inside of her. He filled her up just as he did the other night, only this time there was no pain and it felt otherworldly. She managed to enjoy their last encounter even though it had felt like her insides were ripped open. With that distraction gone, she was barely hanging on to the realm of reality, Deku-kun her only anchor. Every little emotion that crossed Deku-kun's handsome face made her stomach tumble. She loved watching him, to the point she was afraid it was creepy, but she couldn't resist relishing in the way she made him squirm. They continued to meet each other halfway in their thrusts, each of them drawing near climax. They were aware that their noises were no longer muffled and, while somewhat suppressed, not completely snuffed out. They didn't care, it felt too damn good to care. Knock, knock, knock. The dorm rooms weren't very big, but Midoriya felt as if the gap between his bed and the door grew tenfold. His heart raced, his breathing became erratic, and he broke into a cold sweat. "Are we done for?" he thought. Uraraka hadn't noticed and was still riding him. 2 thrusts and Midoriya pulled her in close and touched her forehead with his own. Instead of receiving a passionate that she prepared for, her lips were met with his index finger, suggesting something was wrong. "Somebody is at the door," he whispered. "What are you gonna do, Deku-kun?" she whispered back. "Knock, knock, knock." He was getting more anxious. The person on the other side of that door hadn't given up. Midoriya got up and hauled on a t-shirt and a pair of basketball shorts and tried to calm himself down. "Get under the covers and bunch up so you look like pillows," he whispered, trying to formulate a plan. "Okay." She just wanted to go back to him, and she grumbled internally at whoever interrupted their activities. He looked in his mirror and realized that his flushed skin wasn't going to get any better than its current state. "At least I have no hickeys," he thought. He opened the door just enough to allow vision of his body while also not being conspicuous enough for the person to question his actions. He feigned sleepiness, hoping to throw off whoever was at the door. He looked up at an easily recognizable figure. "Ida, what's up, Ida-san?" he asked as he wiped his eye groggily. "Nothing much. Can I come in?" Every fiber of Midoriya's being screamed at him to deny Ida entry, but he felt like he had no choice. The last thing he wanted to do was confirm his friend's suspicions. "Yes, sure." Uraraka, hearing everything going on, panicked quietly in a ball under the covers. She didn't want Ida to catch them doing something taboo, and better yet, to see her naked. She wouldn't be able to look at him the same again if that happened. She tried to focus on staying still, focusing on the combat training she received from Gunhead about breathing. Upon being given entry, Ida practically made himself feel at home. Midoriya was surprised because this wasn't his style. He was always overbearingly polite and would ask permission for just about everything. Ida's actions were definitely throwing off our protagonist. Midoriya practically jumped through the ceiling when Ida sat on the edge of the bed in front of the pile that was Uraraka. He tried to focus on not giving away signs of distress. He tried not to sweat, he tried not to fidget, he tried not to stutter, but thinking about not doing those things only made it exponentially harder not to. Ada had a serious expression on his face as he always did. It was quite unnerving for Midoriya, considering the situation. Ada was sat on the edge of the bed while Midoriya was left awkwardly standing in the middle of his room. Well, are you going to have a seat? Yeah. Midoriya pulled out his computer chair from his desk and sat facing his stern friend Uraraka, hiding for her life. Midoriya broke the silence with tense words. So, Ada, what's up? Why are you up? I mean, I couldn't sleep. Midoriya was so on edge that he felt like he fell off. Ada wasn't offering any conversation, and his demeanor, while no different than usual, was extra unsettling. What is your situation with Uraraka, Midoriya-san? Nothing much. Why do you ask? His nerves were fraying at the ends. I've been thinking about it ever since I found out about you two. I am very conflicted on the matter. Does Ada like me? Does Ada like Uraraka-san? They would have laughed if they knew what the other was thinking. Why are you conflicted? You see, I am a stickler for the rules. I know where they both thought. And it bothered me to no end that the two of you were behaving so. What's the word I'm looking for? He paused for a minute. Daring? No, that's not it. Never mind, the adjective is essential. My point is that I was concerned at first. We're young, we're irresponsible, and we are ignorant. What are you saying? That's why I did some research on the matter. HUWHAT. I just want you to be prepared. For what exactly? You see, when a man loves a woman very much, the couple couldn't believe their ears but had totally different reactions. Midoriya wanted to pull his hair out and yell in embarrassment and disgust. Uraraka, on the other hand, had to swallow down a barrel of laughter to avoid being caught. No, you are not doing this right now. Midoriya was every shade of red imaginable all at once. It was a feat he didn't even know was possible. I can text the web page if you'd like to low. Thank you, Ida, I appreciate it. Midoriya opened the door and did everything but shove his friend out. Yet Ida lingered, trying to explain to his friend the importance of safe. Uraraka was reeling internally. She couldn't deal with it. He had to go now or her cover would be blown. This was the funniest thing that had happened to her ever since she joined UA, and she just wished she could tell people about it. It was funny, that is, until he warned Midoriya about STIs. Suddenly her internalized laughter deformed into demonic anger. Give him STIs, she thought. It now took all her willpower not to leave the sheets and strangle him until his arrow-shaped eyebrows fell out. She didn't even care that she was naked. At least he wouldn't die without seeing a woman's shape. Eda was blissfully unaware of the monster he had created under the sheets, but Midoriya stiffened at the notion of STIs. It was almost as if he felt her presence shift into something sinister. He wouldn't dare look in her direction for two reasons. One, he didn't want to give her away, and two, he was really scared. I will be texting you the web page regardless. I will check if you have read it every single day until you do, and you will be tested on it to confirm your knowledge on the subject matter. Why me? He couldn't help but think. Thanks, Ida-san. Good night. Good night. He began walking down the hallway and stopped just a few steps away. Congratulations to you both. I'm very happy for you. He shot him a congratulatory smirk and left Midoriya in the hallway. Midoriya was so paralyzed in fear he didn't want to go back into his room. He didn't want to see the extent of the damage Ada's mindless words had caused, nor did he want to do damage control. He wanted to save people, sure, but he thought that saving people from Uraraka's wrath would be impossible. He was thankful, though, thankful that his friend was so goddamn oblivious that he hadn't even noticed Uraraka lying naked under the sheets. That would have been a nightmare, he chuckled. When the door clicked, Uraraka sprung free from her suffocating prison. Can you believe him? I don't have any STIs. Is he mad? What does he take me for? Some kind of slut that has everything that moves. Midoriya didn't know where he found the courage to do some of the things he's done with Uraraka. He did know, however, that no matter how hard he searched himself, that he wouldn't find the answers for this one. To think that Ada was just looking out for me. Yeah, well, it was rude. She crossed her arms in disgust. Midoriya had to resist the urge to stare at her chest while her crossed arms pressed her S together. Uraraka immediately felt bad because she didn't mean to shout at Deku-kun. He was right that Ada just wanted them to be safe. She was shocked that he pretty much gave his blessing. At least she wasn't going to be stuck in some awkward love triangle. I'm sorry, Deku-kun. Midoriya was focusing so hard on not scanning her up and down he didn't register what she had said. What? I said I'm sorry. Ooh, it's okay, Uraraka-san, you didn't do anything wrong. What do you think I said? I don't know. You didn't listen, did you? He was up shit creek without a paddle. He was so scared to be on the receiving end of her fury that he just blurted out the truth without a second thought. It's hard to pay attention when you're naked like that. He clasped his mouth shut. She gave him a playful look and leaned into his body. Why is it? She asked while her fingers scaled their way up his chest. He gulped audibly as she began to strip him. Now, where were we? Uraraka's chocolate eyes fluttered as she sleepily opened them. She looked over to find her gaze upon the naked Deku-kun. She had nestled into his firm, toned chest and drifted off unintentionally. She searched his room for the all-night alarm clock she spotted when she walked in the other night. 715. She panicked as the ramifications sank in. People were mostly definitely awake now, and here she was, naked, cuddling into Deku-kun, with no clothes since she came over in nothing but her thin silk robe. On top of that, how could she possibly explain walking through the boys' dorm? Even with all these concerns rushing about her mind, she couldn't help but gawk upon her man's chiseled figure. He was so tranquil when he slept. She wished that the two of them could stay like this forever. As much as she loved watching him blissfully sleep, something needed to be done about this situation. Just as she motioned to wake him, he began to stir on his own. He began wiping one eye as he looked over at his lover and forced a weak smile. "Good morning," he barely managed to squeeze out before yawning. He rolled over on his side and pulled Uraraka into his chest, causing her to blush intensely. She was melting in his arms but forced herself to pull the words from her stomach. "Deku-kun." "Yeah, it's 7:15. She looked at the clock. 7:22 now actually. He bolted upright, almost throwing Uraraka off him accidentally. Midoriya quickly pieced together the predicament, and while having his girlfriend sleep with him naked last night was the best thing that ever happened to him, he knew it definitely wasn't the brightest idea. He stroked his chin as he tried to formulate a plan, not even noticing the sheet-covered Uraraka gushing at the sight of him standing in front of her nude. He noticed her eyeing him from top to bottom before becoming visibly embarrassed. She pouted as he put a pair of boxers and basketball shorts on. "Something as fine as you shouldn't be allowed to wear clothes," she huffed. Midoriya just sheepishly laughed. His nervous demeanor was rocked by a plan that formulated in the back of his mind. He hauled out a pair of UA slacks and a UA sweatshirt that he bought earlier in the year to support his school. Since it was school-sponsored, uni clothing, it wouldn't be quite as suspicious. She had a hard time pulling the pants up for obvious reasons. Thankfully, the sweater was baggy enough that she could fit into it comfortably. With the clothing situation taken care of, they had to figure out a way to get her back to her dorm undetected, or at the very least, develop a good enough alibi to avoid trouble. Uraraka revealed that last night she crossed the gap between the roofs using her quirk, which is how she snuck over so easily wearing such skimpy clothing. She also made a remark about the cold draft making her uncomfortable in certain ways, which made Midoriya blush violently. That plan wouldn't work though. It was broad daylight and somebody was bound to see her floating above them. They contemplated the idea of one of them feigning sickness. That way, either Uraraka could say she was bringing Midoriya some cold medicine, or Uraraka could play sick and sneak back over after everyone went to class. The only thing making them hesitate was the fact that their teachers and classmates were so overbearing that faking sickness could prove irritating. They were running out of time, so they had no choice but to go with Plan B. Uraraka decided that she would pretend to be sick until roughly lunchtime. This way she'd have plenty of time to wait out her classmates, get ready for class, and show up late enough to make her illness convincing while also not missing too much in class. Midoriya carried on as if everything was normal. Thankfully, his fellow classmates weren't showing any signs of realization. The class couldn't help but notice Uraraka's absence though. "I wonder what's wrong?" Kayuka asked rhetorically. "Probably a cold. I heard it was going around," Kaminari piped up. Some of the class decided to ask Midoriya, who was sat in his chair, twiddling his thumbs anxiously as they were all accustomed to. "Do you have any idea why Uraraka is out?" Momo asked, her face painted with inquisitiveness. "And I know. Why would I know?" he responded, trying not to sound hostile or suspicious. "Well, you guys are really close these days." "Like, really close?" Mina exclaimed, which made Midoriya's face burn with embarrassment. The class giggled at his shameful reaction. Bakugo was ignoring their classmates but still silently analyzing Deku's responses for intel. He knew something was up. He knew Deku long enough to know when he was up to something fishy. The question was, what? Uraraka showed up at lunch. She explained to her worried classmates that she had been suffering with a bad headache and felt too uncomfortable to attend class. She was mostly showered with sympathy, with the occasional scolding from the overachievers in the class, namely Ada and Momo. "Uraraka-san, as heroes we have a duty to maintain the peace even during our moments of weakness. A headache is not reason enough to miss crucial class time that helps us bud into excellent heroes." Ada was relentless in his verbal onslaught. I am sorry, Ada-kun, it won't happen again." She bowed her head in sincere apology, causing her hardened friend's expression to soften. "Uraraka-san, there is something I wish to talk to you about in private when you get the opportunity," Ada insisted. Uraraka knew exactly what he was playing at since she heard the speech he gave Deku-kun last night unaware of her presence. She wanted no part of that awkward conversation. Okay, she didn't have any excuses to avoid her friend, to her dismay. She got her tray of food and sat next to Midoriya. The two sat in awkward silence as their classmates exchanged looks before laying their gaze upon the suspicious couple. The tension between the two of them was so thick that they could taste it over the shitty cafeteria food on their plates. Mina, being as brash as she was, had to interrupt the silence before it killed her. So she said in a sing-song tone, "Are you two dating or what?" The two of them averted eye contact with anybody. Of course, Mina had to go and ask the intrusive questions. Everyone halted their conversations to listen in. Both Midoriya and Uraraka came to the same epiphany upon hearing their friend's question. Neither of them formally determined their relationship status. They both kind of just assumed they were boyfriend and girlfriend, but neither had confirmed the fact with the other person. That thought brought on a whole different kind of tension that teenagers often felt. What is this to him, her? They both wondered, and their blushing faces suddenly became much more serious. This sudden shift in facial expression was obvious enough that even Mina took the hint and backed off. She concluded that she touched on sensitive territory. As the day wore on, their feelings of uncertainty and worry grew exponentially. Uraraka became increasingly worried at the fact they had been performing such carnal acts on uncertain grounds. She knew how passionately she felt about him and that to him he was someone special. I mean, she couldn't see him not feeling the same way, but she wasn't sure. Unbeknownst to Uraraka, Midoriya was mentally reciprocating those feelings. His skittish nature only led him to all the worst possible conclusions. They were both overtaken by fear at the thought of confronting the other. How could they possibly ask such a question without ruining everything? Their teenage minds ran wild with the endless possibilities the conversation could bring, most of which ended poorly. They couldn't help but wonder exactly what they were going to do. Growing up, Midoriya didn't have a reliable support network to turn to. His mom seldom offered good advice, he had no friends to confide in, and even his teachers brushed him off as a quirkless nobody. People didn't care about him or his strife, and because of that, he often internalized all his issues. The bottling of emotions was what ended up making Midoriya such a mess over the years. Even now, with great friends, great mentors, and even a progressing relationship with his longtime bully, he still had these tendencies. He needed to tell somebody about his predicament. He himself did not know what to do with Uraraka. As always, he was overthinking it to the point where he needed to make a conscious effort not to mutter and leak information to his peers. He needed to get it off his chest, and he weighed his options. Uraraka was out of the question for obvious reasons. His classmates would have trouble keeping their lips sealed. Aizawa is against them being together, period. He couldn't explain his situation to his mother because what would she say about it all? That only left one person. He always felt like he could tell All Might anything. Midoriya would openly admit that All Might knows more about him than anybody else in this world. All Might may not have the greatest advice regarding relationships, but he wasn't necessarily wrong the last time he asked for help. What harm could it do, right? Uraraka sat on her bed deep in thought. She just assumed their relationship status. She was just realizing now that all this time they hadn't said anything else other than promising to be by each other's side. Friends can say that to each other. She knew her fears were wrong, they had to be. Friends don't French, have, and cuddle naked. Deku-kun never seemed to be the type to want meaningless. She was 99.9% certain of that. That 0.1%, however, was what caused a lump to form in her throat. What ifs danced about her teenage mind. She knew just how badly she pined for him, and this awkward silence between them was killing her. She wanted to go over there and put her feelings on display. She prayed that he would cherish and reciprocate them. She had been bold up until now, but for some reason, the fear of rejection was an insurmountable wall, with Deku-kun waiting on the other side. She hated herself for not being able to be frank with him. She smothered her frustration in the pillow on her bed. What should I do? Like Midoriya, she began contemplating a confidant. At least if she tells her worries to somebody else, she'll gain another perspective. She already explained herself to her mother, and she couldn't bother to give her the more intimate details of their relationship. She trusted the girls in her class, but who could she tell Mina loved gossip? Kyoyuka would be uncomfortable at the mention of. Momo would probably lecture her on such venereal activities. Tsu and Tora seemed to be the best choices. She was still unsure if she should disclose her woes at all. Like some strange twist of fate, there was a knock at her door. It was Tsu. How ironic. Midoriya texted his mentor about an hour ago. Teachers and students did not disclose personal contacts typically, but they were a special case. All Might had agreed to meet him at the beach in an hour. He had other commitments to attend to before he could meet up, but Midoriya understood he held it for this long. He can wait another hour at least. Midoriya stood idly in the sand, enjoying the cool breeze that graced his face as it peeled off the water. With his mind unraveling due to his racing thoughts, he hadn't even noticed his hero and mentor sneak up on him. He didn't know anything until he felt a hard pat on his shoulder, effectively causing him to jump 10 feet in the air. All Might laughed heartily. Scaring his pupil would never get old. Midoriya, my boy, thinking that hard is bad for your health. I know, but I can't help it. You always did overthink everything. All Might held his chin and nodded sarcastically. Anyway, I know something is bothering you because you wouldn't have called me out here otherwise. Yeah. He paused to gather his thoughts. He still didn't quite have the words to explain himself. If I had to guess, I'd have to say there are problems with Uraraka-san. Correct. Midoriya wondered if he was that transparent, which opened a whole other can of worries, but he shoved them aside for the time being. He began to explain some of the happenings, with Uraraka trying to leave out intimate details wherever he could. He was petrified that the fact he was performing lewd acts with her would taint the purity that All Might sought in his protege. This worked for a while until he had to explain why his situation was so complicated. Ennui at Yumi took a deep, shaky breath and whispered so quietly that he hoped All Might did not possess superhuman hearing. His attempts were fruitless as All Might's eyes opened wide at the revelation. All Might paused for a while, not saying anything, not even showing signs of facial expression. His face remained utterly still, like a painting. All Might's solidarity was unnerving for the young Midoriya. He felt like an utter dumbass for confiding in someone who expects so much from him. He felt like he had disappointed his hero. Let me get this straight. The seconds between his thoughts were unbearable. You slept with young Uraraka, despite all school rules forbidding it, and even more astonishing than that, you did so without establishing a concrete relationship with her. And now you are confused as to what your situation is, and you are too afraid to make a move despite how you feel. Midoriya couldn't do anything but nod weakly at the endless truths All Might was firing at him. All Might stroked his chin for a few moments before opening his mouth. Midoriya anticipated his response, but his mentor only closed his mouth and went back to pondering, to Midoriya's dismay. As much admiration he feels towards the man, Midoriya had to resist the urge to yell at All Might to spit it out. All Might extended his arm and put his hand on the young teen's shoulder as a sign of reassurance. As a teacher of UA, I cannot allow this to go on. Midoriya's head dropped and he had to fight the pangs of pain that resonated in his chest. He felt utterly defeated until he heard his mentor pipe up. But, as your mentor, I understand just how important this is to you. How important she is to you. I won't be able to do any more for you than turn a blind eye. I cannot manipulate the school to bend the rules for you too. So, I suggest you try to remain as discreet as possible, at least regarding UL activity. There may be a little flexibility with a typical relationship, but do not abuse it. I am only doing this because I trust you. You are a great kid with a good head on your shoulders. All Might was actually showing signs of approval, which lightened the burden on Midoriya's shoulders significantly. However, he did not receive any advice regarding his situation with Uraraka. All Might recognized his pupil's concerned expression and continued his train of thought. As for your relationship situation, the best thing you can do is come clean. You've experienced her in her most intimate state, so this should be a piece of cake. You need to go in there and tell her I am here. Midoriya had to choke back a laugh. He knew Uraraka would be a mixture of confusion and hysterics if he took this advice literally. As blinding as All Might's radiance was, his lack of expertise in the field of romance was blatantly obvious. Nonetheless, All Might never ceased to alleviate his anxiety. Regardless of his current physical condition, All Might will always be his hero. Sue and Uraraka sat across from each other at the mall food court. Sue was eating a bowl of ice cream and Uraraka was more so playing with hers. As her scoop melted into mush, Sue couldn't help but notice how distraught her chestnut-tired friend was. Is everything okay, Uraraka-chan? Yeah, I guess I don't know. She slammed her head on the table, drawing the attention of people nearby for just a moment before they carried on with their day. She nearly landed directly into her ice cream. That would have been embarrassing. What's the matter? Sue was not one of many words, but she made them count when she did speak. One of the qualities that Uraraka appreciated about her. It's me and Deku-kun. I knew something was going on. Tell me about it. Uraraka's distress bubbled to the surface as her friend attentively listened. She even made remarks about Deku-kun's physique and even his performance in bed, though those things just slipped out. It made Sue visibly embarrassed, and Uraraka profusely apologized for that. Well, Midoriya-san doesn't seem like the type who would do something like that. I know, that's what I've been thinking. I'm just not entirely sure. It sounds like you two need to have a serious talk to me. This tension is unhealthy for the two of you. You're definitely right, Sue. He'll try to talk to him tonight. I just wish I knew what to do about these stupid school rules regarding relationships. Yeah, I'll just have to worry about that after. Don't worry though, your secret is safe with me. She gestured, zipping her lips shut, which made Uraraka giggle lightly. It's a good thing Sue showed up when she did. I will say though, I am a little jealous if what you are saying is true, Uraraka-chan. The two of them laughed heartily as if nothing was ever the matter. Uraraka was definitely feeling better about the whole thing. She was determined to go out there and sweep her man off of his feet, whether he liked it or not. 5:46 p.m. Midoriya finally made it back to UA from the beach. He was kicking himself for choosing a meeting location so far away from the school. He felt like he needed a better spot to meet with his mentor. Midoriya made a mental note of it as he strolled towards the men's dorm. He decided he desperately needed to freshen up. He used the opportunity to run to and from the beach across town. Running helped him calm his nerves, and he was always looking to improve his body. Now though, it left him in a sweaty, disheveled mess that wasn't flattering in any way, shape, or form, regardless if that was how she had seen him after their nights of intimacy. With the dorm coming into view, he saw a figure walking towards him. It was one that he recognized all too well. Kaken. Midoriya hoped that if he kept his mouth shut that the two of them would have walked past one another and avoid confrontation. He avoided making eye contact, or even averting his gaze from the ground. He was not in the mood for Kaken's antics. He had other things to worry about, and he didn't want to pile on anything extra. Unfortunately, about 20 meters before they reached each other, his ash-blonde friend pierced the silence with his gruff voice. It was different though, which caught Midoriya off guard. It wasn't hostile. He couldn't really explain what it was like. He browsed through his vocabulary for adjectives to describe Kaken's tone of voice, but the closest he could come up with was serious or indifferent. Deku, walk with me. Uraraka had been back for quite some time after her chat with Sue. Following those events, she was trying to play over potential sequences in her head again and again. She reviewed only positive thoughts though, as she feared that she'd back out if she even considered the possibility of things going awry. She couldn't allow her thoughts to become too positive though, since they lead her down a path of growing discomfort in her lower abdomen. She had to resist the urge to not jump his bones this time, and at the very least clear up the fog surrounding their relationship. She could decide to do whatever after that problem was resolved. If he just wasn't so goddamn tempting. She still hadn't figured out where, when, and how they were going to talk. She assumed the safest way would be to text him, but her anxiety caused her to put it off. Even though she was under the protection of a screen, she still felt extremely vulnerable to the scrutiny of his response. It was though their relationship was a delicate glass structure and the smallest slip of the tongue could shatter it. Of course, she was exaggerating, as all teens do. She was staring blankly at her phone for God knows how long. She looked at it like it was some fearsome creature, and if she averted her gaze, it would attack her. She finally swallowed her fear and picked it up. "You're Raka Deku-kun, can we talk?" She waited a few minutes and there was no response. She felt a looming sense of defeat encompassing her body. She was afraid he didn't want to talk to her. She slapped herself on the cheeks and instilled herself with optimism once more. "He's probably busy or something," she said to herself, not entirely convinced by her words, but it would have to do for now. What do you want to talk about, Kaken? Him not dense Deku. I thought about it for a while, but I think I have a good understanding of what's going on, and if I'm right, you're a pathetic motherer. There it is. Midoriya chuckled internally, Kaken's vulgarity reducing the tension only a smidge. He was still perturbed by Kaken's demeanor. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't swearing, he wasn't shooting him death glares. It brought Midoriya's fretful nature forward in all of its earnest. What do you mean? Correct me if I'm wrong. You and your Raka are ing. I assume that since UA has rules against between students, you're in a pretty shitty situation. The rules prevent you two from really being together, and you were so caught up with covering it up that you didn't fill holes in your relationship, except for her physical ones. Midoriya felt himself break into a cold sweat. He was glad he hadn't showered yet, because it would have been all for naught otherwise. How the hell did he figure all of that out? He began to panic. His mouth was as arid as the Sahara Desert. Words could not escape from his mouth even if he had any to say. "I don't know what you take me for, Deku. I am not an idiot, you should know that. Dumbass." "Yeah." Midoriya paused before mustering his courage. "Why are you so concerned about it?" "Because you're an idiot who can't do anything right, Deku." Midoriya hung his head down as he was painfully reminded of the original meaning behind his childhood nickname. "So, here's what you do." Midoriya blinked exasperatedly. He couldn't have heard that right. Kaken was going to offer him advice about his love life. Kaken. Everybody knew that Bakugo was a total hard ass. He was the most difficult, prideful, stubborn, obnoxious, pompous douchebag at UA, and he seemed to relish those things as his defining qualities. Everyone knew it to be true, including Midoriya, which made this whole thing seem all the more surreal. "Will you stop staring at me like a moron and listen to what I'm telling you?" "Ooh, sorry, I just didn't expect you to ever want to help me." "TCH, it's not about helping you." "Well, what is it about then?" Kaken paused for a moment, debating whether or not to disclose any personal information to the most irritating person he knew. I like romance novels and shows and shit, so when I see you something like this up so bad, it pisses me off. Midoriya would have scoffed at the notion of Kaken being a hopeless romantic if anybody had so much as suggested it. Now that it was out in the open, Midoriya didn't feel the need to choke down a laugh, but rather, he respected his friend's tastes and appreciated the fact he would tell him something like that. "Don't stare at me like that. I ain't giving you advice on how to get in my pants, you weirdo." And with that, they were back within the realms of reality. Bakugo cleared his throat and went back to his train of thought. Okay, so first of all, Midoriya felt a hard whack on top of his head. The inflicted area was throbbing violently, and the spot was definitely going to form a lump. Oh, what the hell? You shouldn't be in girls you care about without establishing a relationship first, idiot. You're the one who cares so much about people's feelings, yet you didn't even stop to think about what you were doing. Christ, you piss me off. Midoriya couldn't help but wonder if his friend should get tested for some form of mental instability issue. Here Kaken was helping him. Next thing you know, he was cradling a lump on the crown of his head. Anyway, you have to man the up and tell her how you really feel. Not just that, but you have to ask her the out. Throw a set and y'all be fine. As for Aizawa, there ain't shit he can say if you don't get caught. Not getting caught means thinking with the head on your goddamn shoulders. You got that? Midoriya just nodded his head, vehemently soaking in every word of wisdom. UA won't just let you too freely, however. Normal relationships occur all the time with the holding, hand-holding, and cuddling all the time. They can't say shit about that. If you take it too far, y'all get in shit though, so try to keep your hands off of her in public for sake. Lastly, eyes are going to be on you too because of the stunt you pulled, which landed you with this shitty punishment. Gotta play it cool for the time being, or y'all just ruin everything as usual. He paused for a moment to search for any further tips to offer Deku. Ignore the class. They want to see you two bastards together, so they'll be approving. They'll probably give you a hard time, but they're only around. Just try not to get too handsy around them, especially Ballhead. Midoriya burst into laughter. He couldn't believe that Kaken was capable of telling a good joke. As long as Midoriya had known him, he felt like Kaken was far too belligerent to resort to telling casual jokes. It was definitely a breath of fresh air. He looked forward and saw Kaken stop and turn on his heel. The king of Explodo Kills held a finger within inches of his nose. "Don't this up or I will murder you." Got that? He just nodded his head sheepishly in response to the threat. "Now get lost, you got shit to do." Midoriya watched as Kaken walked off into the distance, shoulders slouched. "Thanks, pal." 7:12 p.m. Hot water percolated into intricate streams that danced jovially off of his frizzy green hair and freckled cheeks. Steam concealed his athletic features, only revealing a silhouette in their place. He inhaled deeply, calmly, and exhaled in a similar fashion. His once apprehensive demeanor had settled into the hands of tranquility. Midoriya couldn't help but replay his shocking emotional conversation with lifelong friend, Bully Kaken. Midoriya never pegged him to be the sensitive type, but he was eternally grateful that Kaken's hardened exterior faltered during his time of need. Midoriya understood how he felt about Uraraka, but articulating his thoughts proved to be a more troublesome task than he envisioned. That said, he was no longer nervous knowing that the two people he looked up to the most had put their faith in him. He resolved to let his heart speak for itself when the time came. Overthinking everything was what got him into this mess in the first place, after all. It was a combination of that and the fact he didn't want to be berated by Ida again for misuse of the hot water again. The faucet squeaked as he shut the water off. He reached and grabbed his towel from the hook on the door. He dried himself off, wrapped the towel around his waist, and exited the stall. His frizzy hair was still matted to his forehead since it never relinquished much water from its clutches. His sopping, disheveled hair nearly stood on end when he opened his locker to find his clothes and room key missing. The only article that resided in his storage space was a small note with barely legible scrawl on it. That read, "If you had just sent me her nudes. Tut tut. Great boy." Mind of his voice bellowed throughout the showers. He was blissfully unaware of the audience that gathered outside upon hearing his irate screaming, including a one Uraraka Ochako. Midoriya managed to compose himself and attempted to plan an escape to avoid the compromising situation that inevitably awaited him on the other side of that door. He looked for vents, windows, anything. Unfortunately, he came up short. There was no other option than to walk out the front door and pray that his classmates were feeling antisocial tonight. He knew that this was never the case and hung his head down in chagrin as he prepared for the eternal shaming coming his way. Steam cascaded about his feet as the door creaked open. As he had predicted, his entire class was on the other side, patiently awaiting his exit. A congregation of differing reactions graced the faces of his classmates. Most of the girls were embarrassed at the sight of a practically nude Midoriya, previously unaware of his chiseled form. Mina went between gawking at the barely clothed man in front of her and scowling jealously at her chest-attired friend. Kyoyuka blushed a bright crimson, looking between the gaps in her fingers sheepishly to Kaminari's dismay. Noma was taken back by the sight of him but was not overwhelmed since she was relatively comfortable with nudity. Tora was, well, nobody knew what she was doing, but she was probably either embarrassed or basking in the view. Sue remained reserved, but her composure most definitely wavered. Uraraka was a cluster of emotions. She was embarrassed at his lack of clothing. She was pissed that his birthday suit was no longer reserved for her eyes only. She was also feeling a burning sensation build up between her thighs, developing into an insatiable heat. "Why does he do this to me?" she screamed internally. Thoughts of tearing him to pieces came to the forefront of her imagination, which only amplified the flush that took residence on her cheeks. The men depicted one of four emotions: envy, admiration, embarrassment, or hilarity. Kirishima, Ida, and Yuuga were busy applauding his musculature. Shiro, Mineta, and Kaminari were being eaten alive by jealousy. Shoji, Todoroki, and Takoyami all silently voiced their approval. Ajiro and Kuda couldn't help but feel embarrassed for their poor comrade, and Bakugo burst into fits of laughter at Deku's misfortune. Midoriya was inundated by the eyes that glared at him. He wanted nothing more than to sink into the floor like a certain Mirio Tagada. These feelings were magnified when he felt a sudden swish followed immediately by a cold breeze. He looked to see Mineta making his way down the hallway with his towel. He immediately covered up his most important areas before anyone saw too much. Luck was not on his side, however. Everyone managed to catch a glimpse of the boys. The guys erupted into laughter and Mina whistled loudly. Uraraka interrupted the uncomfortable exchange by turning her back to him and allowing him to shield himself from their gaze. As much as she wanted to continue to stare, mouth agape at him, she decided she could do that as much as she wanted later, but she wasn't happy about her sacrifice. "Why, you are such a party-pooper, Uraraka," Mina exclaimed, trying to rile up the girls, but to no avail. "Nudity on campus is inappropriate. I know this isn't your fault, Midoriya-san, but this is still unforgivable. I'll go and hunt down Mineta and force him to return your things." Ida interjected amongst the chaos. "Can't you just go to your room and get clothes?" Kaminari asked, trying not to look ticked off at Kyoyuka's expression. She took my key too." Midoriya was desperately maneuvering behind Uraraka, away from the prying eyes of a certain curious pink-skinned individual. Uraraka huffed at her friend and shot her the dirtiest look she could muster while simultaneously crossing her arms. She tried to make it very clear that Mina was encroaching on her territory and she should back off if she knows what's good for her. Mina just playfully laughed in response. "Fine, it's not fair you get to keep all that to yourself though." Uraraka tried to bury her blush under a weakening scowl. Bakugo finally stopped laughing but was still gasping for air and wiping the tears from his eyes. He walked toward the two of them and attempted to stifle laughter between his words. "Deku, you're a dumbass." Those were the only words he could muster before going into another fit of laughter. When he turned around though, his expression became more serious and his gaze fell upon the class members still taking in the spectacle. "What the is your problem? Funds over jackasses, go about doing your shit or whatever." Bakugo stalked off, letting a chuckle slip out as he walked away. The class took his not-so-subtle hint and cleared the hallway. Mina had to practically be dragged away by the other members of the class. "So not fair," she pouted as she was pulled away from the scene. Uraraka and Midoriya were left in front of the men's showers. When the rest of class cleared out, Uraraka turned to face the fiercely blushing Midoriya. She tried to maintain eye contact as he still desperately cupped his hands around his junk. so she trailed off, uncertain of what to say. So he returned. Why didn't you just go back into the shower? 2.0. The two of them burst into laughter. 7:51 p.m. Knowing that nobody else was around, Midoriya backed in through the door and hauled Uraraka in behind him, still cradling himself with one hand. I'm not supposed to be in here, Deku-kun. Well, we have to talk, and I'm not standing in the hallway like this any longer. Now, in the presence of the girl that licked virtually every crevice of his body, he allowed his shabby defense to fall, revealing himself in all his glory to her once more. This made it increasingly hard to stay focused, but she tried her best to subdue her temptations for the time being. Silence loomed in the steamy room for just a few moments. Midoriya took a deep breath before taking the plunge. What are we? All of this that we've been doing up until now, how do you feel about it? I mean, I don't know, Deku-kun. I guess I just assumed some things. What did you assume? Before she could answer, he opened his mouth again, not wanting to give her an opportunity to reject him. He was about to let her go. I want you to be my girlfriend. I just assumed that's what we were, boyfriend and girlfriend. We never really discussed those things with each other, and I've been freaking out the past couple days. I mean, I really enjoy your company. I enjoy the way things are. I enjoy the amazing, and I don't want any of that to end because Midoriya's train of thought derailed as his eyes traced along her features. God, she is beautiful, and he found himself getting distracted by the qualities he had come to associate with the word perfection. The way her lips innocently parted as he confessed his feelings melted his heart into a pile of mush. It looked like she was longing for something, longing for him, and he couldn't let that go by the wayside. He cleared his throat, audibly steeling his spirit for the words he was about to utter. I'm in love with you, Uraraka-san. She stood there, dumbfounded by his confession. She assumed that he liked her, but his words sent a rush of heat across her entire body. She felt hot, uncomfortably so, and she would have noticed her discomfort had she not been overwhelmed by another feeling. Uraraka wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him into a deep. They continued until the need for oxygen was so dire that they had no choice but to pull apart and regain the lost air from their lungs. I love you too, Deku-kun. Her soft voice sent chills up his spine as he pulled her into his chest. She nestled into his arms comfortably, and everything in the world suddenly didn't seem too bad. Snapping back to reality, they pulled apart and decided it was best that only he wait in the men's shower, since she wasn't allowed to be in there in the first place. As she left, she finally allowed her temptations to deluge her mind. She scanned him top to bottom, almost as if she was trying to memorize every muscle, every freckle, every crevice that his figure had to offer. He blushed and playfully shooed her outside as she pouted back at him. She was grateful that nobody was in the hallway and decided to keep watch in case Mina had slipped free from the class. Ada turned the corner with Midoriya's clothes in one hand and his key in the other. Uraraka just smiled and pointed to the shower as Ada walked towards her. Upon entering the shower, Uraraka put her ear to the door to make sense of the muffled conversation she could hear on the other side. Thanks, Ada, you're a real lifesaver. Anytime, Midoriya-san. Question, why didn't you just go back into the shower instead of standing in the hallway like that? Second time I've been asked that, and I'm still not sure. I guess I'm an exhibitionist. Midoriya laughed heartily and Uraraka giggled on the other side of the door. Well, you caused quite a stir amongst your female audience, it seems. Oh really? Uraraka wasn't sure if she wanted to scowl or feel worried. It isn't like it matters. I have a girlfriend. She perked up at his words. Her heart fluttered and butterflies boisterously made their presence known inside the confines of her stomach. She left the hallway clutching her heart and cherishing the words that graced her eavesdropping ears. Tonight was a good night. Her hand sifted through his frizzy green hair. They trailed along the landscape of his defined back muscles, prodding and memorizing every detail with such an intensity that one might suggest she was reading Braille. She listened attentively to the sounds that her delicate touch dragged out of him, grunts, groans, whimpers, and moans he had no hope of suppressing. It was difficult to pick out these cues between her own obnoxious noises. The intoxicating scent permeated the room. How long they were there, reeling in ecstasy, neither of them were sure. They found themselves overwhelmed by the waves of pleasure that jolted through them with each and every thrust. Every stolen, every love bite, every time one tongue trailed the contours of a neck or collarbone, they shuddered with reckless abandon. Each time the warmth of his body vacated her presence, she whimpered for his return. The room was dark and dangerous. Even after eyes came into focus, it was still hard to determine the happenings within the room. What were merely seconds felt like minutes, hours even, that their bodies were divided. Uraraka was about to plead for his return, but those words were quickly swallowed and replaced with a guttural moan that echoed about the room. His tongue had found its way to her sopping, aching folds where it treated her flower so delicately, so intimately, that it sent chills up her spine and her back arched in exasperated response. She was sensitive from the repeated orgasms she endured throughout the night, so she couldn't help but try and squirm away from the overwhelming stimulation of her clit. Her sounds pierced the night, indifferent to the potential of being heard. His tongue was very familiar with her mound, but every time he found himself trapped between her luscious thighs, his tongue explored every crook, crevice, and cranny he could find. He analyzed her every movement, her every sound, and her every facial expression, albeit with increased difficulty in the dead of night. His tongue gently swirled around her swollen and needy clit, sucking on occasion, which made the arch in her back increase tenfold. His tongue swept voraciously along her dripping entrance, which made her whimper and practically beg for what followed. He felt his whole body melt into the mattress as her breath hitched. With his tongue now exploring her inner walls, her hands reached to grab a tuft of hair, gently pulling and tugging on it to encourage him. She found herself closer and closer to her destination. Reverie of an umpteenth orgasm engulfed her mind, and the sensitivity she once felt was cranked up to 11. Within mere moments, he was going to push her over the edge, and she'd have to try her hardest not to pop his head off with her thighs. One more suck on her throbbing button would have flung her into the thralls of climax, when she suddenly felt a lack of warmth between her legs. Deku-kun, she desperately yelled into the dark. She was panting and was both frantic and frustrated that he would do such a thing. He could only chuckle in response. If there had been more light, he would have found her change in facial expression to be utterly adorable. "Deku-kun, I was right there," she yelped as he turned her over onto her stomach. She reveled in the way he took control. He spread her legs apart on the bed, and she felt the anticipation building up within her core. His mouth once again took residence on her still excited clit. He licked and sucked with a new fervor that had her in a disheveled mess of arousal. It was one thing that he was eating her out so passionately in a new, euphoric position, but when she felt his hands creep along her ass, squeezing and twisting her hardened buds, she was done. Midoriya was desperately trying to hold her down as she spasmed away from his mouth, trying to ensure that he coerced every bit of pleasure out of her body. Her convulsions stopped, and she simply resigned herself to the bed, with far too little energy to move another muscle. He crawled his way along the bed and took the vacant space alongside her. His hand caressed her back, gently brushing along the curvature and maneuvering towards her hips and ass. She sighed contentedly as she faced him smiling in return. "Was it good, Uraraka-san? Do you even need to ask that, Deku-kun?" He chuckled. "I guess not." She loved his laugh. She loved how his face contorted when he laughed. Even though it was dark and he was barely visible, she could picture his beaming smile. That same smile that pushed her to be the best she could be, and the same smile she fell in love with. She hadn't realized she had been staring without uttering a word until she caught a glimpse of his concerned expression. She headed him off at the pass before he could let his worrisome mind wander. "I love you, Deku-kun." He wrapped the caressing arm around her waist and her forehead gently. "I love you too. It's a good thing that everybody has gone home for the weekend. Who would have guessed we were the only ones who didn't have plans to leave campus this weekend? I bet they all thought we planned this, but we really didn't, did we? Yeah, thank God for that. There is no way they wouldn't have heard your loud moans echoing through the hallway, Uraraka-san." "Hey, I was not that bad." She scowled fiercely at him, but to him, she was as fierce as a kitten. He couldn't help but chortle as her brows furrowed. "TheMortalCoil? Yeah, okay." She playfully hit him on the arm after finally adjusting herself from the compromising position she was in. "What time is it anyway?" Midoriya asked, searching for a clock in Uraraka's room. His view was obstructed by Uraraka's nude body hovering over him. "Does it matter?" Her eyes looked at him lustfully, playfully. "Ready to go again, huh?" And with that, the darkness surrendered itself to their intimacy. All eyes were on Midoriya and Uraraka come Monday morning. The two seemed to have a radiant glow about them, indicating a rather successful weekend. Suspicions were inevitable, considering a new couple was the only two remaining in the 1A dorm with minimal supervision. Even the most candid classmates swallowed their interrogation until a more appropriate time arose. The question on everybody's mind, including Uraraka and Midoriya's, was what Aizawa-sensei would have to say about the entire thing. He did deliver them a swift and grueling punishment and referred to their interactions as frivolous novelties extraneous to the path of a hero. He was always a workaholic, repeatedly rejecting the advances of fellow hero, Ms. Joke. Whether she was asking him ironically did not diminish his level of disinterest in a romantic relationship. Eraserhead was definitely not a believer in love, making for a distressful situation for the new couple. Aizawa slinked into the class, wrapped in his sleeping bag, a tradition on Monday mornings. During his weekends, he still spent ample time doing hero work. Unfortunately, since his hero hours fell under the darkness of night, tired was his default setting. He freed himself from the safety of his cocoon and rubbed his temples at the boisterous noise of teenagers. "It's Monday morning. Please refrain from creating excessive noise until I'm awake at the very least." His sleep-deprived eyes scanned the entire class, stopping at Uraraka. His gaze made her feel uncomfortable, and she couldn't hide her guilt even if she tried. His eyes began to wander until they locked onto Midoriya's own pools of emerald. In typical Midoriya fashion, he sheepishly cracked a smile, and light gleamed off the droplets of cold sweat that formed on his face. Aizawa shot them both a look that said, "Meet me after class." Time stands still for no man, regardless of circumstance. As the perpetual motion of time pushed the day forward, anxiety swelled in the pit of their stomachs. Their punishment was back on track, and an unspoken meeting between them and their sensei would not only put them behind schedule, but it could also possibly ruin everything they worked so hard to achieve. 3:05 p.m. That concludes today's classes. Be sure to finish your homework on pages 68, 77, and 89. I will see you all tomorrow. Midoriya breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps he forgot about it. He was hopeful, but knowing Aizawa, placing bets on his attentiveness was a losing ordeal. "Midoriya, Uraraka, I would like to speak with you a moment before you resume your duties." The two gulped in sync, fearing the wrath of the ever-frightening Aizawa-sensei. As the class filed out, Midoriya looked frantically, hoping even one classmate would stay behind as witness to what he thought was unavoidable doom. It has come to my attention," he began in an unenthusiastic tone, "that you two have begun a romantic relationship." "Yeah," Uraraka squeaked, shocking Midoriya by her relatively quick and straightforward response. "I see." The silence had a time-distorting effect that nipped at every one of Midoriya's nerves. The last thing he needed was to be kicked out of UA, and he didn't want to drag her down with him as well. "Congratulations to you both," what the two of them shrieked in unison. Their shrill voices pierced the ears of the constantly irritated Aizawa, forcing a scowl of ferocious intensity to overtake his nonchalant expression. "Did you think that I would oppose the idea? Well, ever since you punished us it seemed like you were trying to keep us apart. If him being completely honest," Midoriya stated firmly. "Oh, is that so? I myself believe romance to be fatuous, but that does not mean I do not have the capacity to understand you two, nor does that put me in a position to intervene. I understand that the two of you are young adults and romantic relationships happen frequently at all schools, including this one. I cannot bother myself to muster the energy to worry about your interactions." He took a long deep breath as his two students gawked at him gleefully. That said, he paused, and the suspense quickly warped the expressions of the two before him. "I punished you both because of your abuse of curfew hours as well as intentions of Yule activity, which is prohibited amongst students living on campus. If I so much as catch wind of a rumor suggesting physical relations between the two of you, a week of campus maintenance will seem like a walk in the park, I can assure you of that." The look on Aizawa's face was so unsettling that Midoriya felt the color drain from his cheeks. He knew that his sensei was serious, and he would have to be extremely cautious going forward if he wanted to remain a student here at UA. If there was any silver lining, it was that he and Uraraka could now be together without the hassle of concealing their affection. He was certain that she felt the same way. They always seemed to be on the same page lately. "You two still have a list to complete today. I suggest you begin, lest you fall behind," Aizawa said, breaking the silence that lasted an indeterminate amount of time. The two frantically set off in opposite directions, without exchanging words, not that they needed to after that. Their hearts were uplifted at the notion they were free to date, free to show affection, and free to attend UA as a couple. It was bothersome that it came with its limitations, but they could always find a way around that. Near the end of their lists, Uraraka and Midoriya noticed that Aizawa had crossed out some of the activities he had written down. They assumed that he was cutting them some slack given the new revelation of their amorous relationship. This allowed them to clue up a few hours early so they could spend some time together this evening. 7:13 p.m. Even Aizawa-sensei can be a real softie, it seems, Uraraka giggled as they strolled through campus, arms linked. "Yeah, for sure, just don't tell Ms. Joke though. She'd be all over him like soy on rice." They both chuckled. "It's pretty awesome that everyone seems okay with us doing this. I was so scared." "What were you scared of, Uraraka-san?" "Well, I was scared of you, of us, of our friends, and super afraid of being kicked out of UA. I still owe it to my ma and pa to finish this hero course so they can take it easy." A warm-hearted smile graced Midoriya's face. His smile was so goofy, so infectious, that she couldn't help but blush and smile in return. "How did you make out with your list today?" Midoriya felt bad about breaking the chain of conversation, but he was wondering if her list had met the same fate as his own. "It was pretty quick. So many tasks were scratched out on the bottom of my list, which was weird." "Really, mine too. He probably wanted to give us the opportunity to do something like this before we would literally be tied up till minutes before curfew." "Oh, I also found Midnight Sensei's cat." "Really, where was she?" Uraraka corrected her boyfriend. "He was in Kuda's room. Kuda saw him lurking around one day and assumed he was a stray. Kuda didn't say anything, well, because he's Kuda. After he got to talking though, I found out that Midnight Sensei's cat and his rabbit got along famously well. All's well that ends well, huh?" "Yep." Midoriya motioned for the two of them to sit on a bench overlooking a pond. She leaned onto his muscular shoulder and sighed contentedly as they watched the sun liquefy into the horizon. Midoriya bolted upright suddenly, startling Uraraka. "What's wrong, Deku-kun?" "Oh crap, I forgot I owed Kakin a fight tonight for helping me with dinner back then. He's going to be so pissed." Uraraka burst into hysterics. She stood up next to him, leaned in, and pulled him in for a passionate, "Never change, Deku-kun. I want." It was like every other day at UA for Kaminari Denki. He fidgeted in his seat as present mic droned on and on about something English-related. Kaminari didn't understand the importance of the class if it wasn't going to serve him any real purpose as a hero, but he had no choice but to endure it. The endless babble about linguistics was equivocal to sprinkling him with magical sleeping dust. He felt his eyes get heavy, but just prior to fading away into the realm of dreams he caught himself. In a desperate attempt to stave off sleeping through another class, he decided to look around the room and found himself lost in thought. Hida and Momo were always taking notes like their lives depended on it. "It's so lame, man. I wish they could just learn how to kick back and relax so it doesn't make the cool guys look so bad." His eyes wandered away from the overachievers and onto the newly crowned lovebirds Uraraka and Midoriya. "Man, he's lucky as hell to have such a cutie. It makes me sick to watch those two make puppy dog eyes at each other all day, blah." After scanning the members of his class one by one, Kaminari's eyes fixated on Kaioyuka, who seemed encaptured in the lesson. Kaminari didn't think she enjoyed English that much, but he soon figured out that since Present Mike was a music-based hero, she was more interested in his lectures. The longer he gazed, the more her features seemed to pop out to him. This wasn't unusual for Kaminari. He kind of had a thing for the earjack girl, but all of his attempts to look like a cool guy flopped in front of her. She's such a cutie, I wish I knew what to say to her. Him always met with that sassy attitude and she shuts me down. Such a buzzkill man. He'll prove to her that I'm cool and she'll totally fall for me eventually. Kayuka felt like somebody was watching her, but she did her best to ignore it. She was trying to focus on the lesson because her marks had been slipping in the course the past few weeks. She assumed that it was Minda who was staring at her and sending that chill down her spine. She cringed at the thought of the expression that the little creepazoid was making at her. Despite her efforts, that eerie feeling would not stop plaguing her psyche. She decided to take a quick look around to see if anybody was looking at her. Being as discreet as she could, she quickly looked right and then to the left, only to lock eyes with Kaminari. Kaminari was totally spaced out to the point where he could start drooling any second. This ticked off Kayuka and she shot him a glare that had the sharpness of 1,000 razor blades, which caused our lightning boy to snap to attention in his seat. Kayuka went back to her notes and tried not to think of whatever perverse things were crossing his mind. He was probably just spaced out and looking in my direction. There's no reason that he'd be looking at me, he's just a dumbass. He was probably just trying to think of ways to convince me he's not a total tool, but that won't be happening. Kayuka and Kaminari went about the rest of their class this way before the bell rang and they were all dismissed. Kayuka was walking down the path to the dorms while the rest of her classmates trailed behind. Kaminari, who was hanging around Minda and Fumikage, decided to run ahead to chat her up. Hey there, pretty lady, mind if I join you? Make like a good little electric boy and buzz off. Sheesh, okay, he'll back off. Sorry. Kaminari slowed his pace to allow his friends to catch up to him defeatedly. Kayuka, on the other hand, felt like she may have been a bit too harsh. Nah, he knows that I don't mean it, or does he? He is pretty dense, especially when he uses his quirk. She thought back to the last time he overused his quirk and essentially had the IQ of a roasted potato. She chuckled to herself while recollecting the image. Minda chuckled and pointed at Kaminari as he caught up with his friend. Kaminari couldn't help but feel like Minda's expression was a little too joyful after watching one of his best friends get rejected again. Give it up, Kaminari. Kayuka will never fall for you. Why, because she's already madly in love with me. Minda laughed heartily as he gestured his thumbs toward himself. Yeah, in your dreams, dude. The only girl that will ever be in your life is Pamela Henderson. Low blow, Kaminari, low blow. Minda clenched both of his fists as dramatic tears flowed down his cheeks. You two are idiots, Fumikage grunted at the two. It was a lax night at the dorm. Some people were in their rooms studying, others were at the fitness center, some were preparing for bed, but Kaminari and Kirishima lazed around the common area hoping for their classmates to be more sociable. What is it with everyone, man? Does nobody want to hang out or what? The lightning-haired boy asked his scarlet-eyed amigo. I know how you feel, bro. It really is that nobody wants to get together in the evenings anymore. I guess we're getting closer and closer to crunch time. Kirishima shrugged his shoulders. I'm actually surprised you're here right now. I figured that you would be working out, honestly, since you're a total fitness nut. You're not wrong, but I usually get up really early in the morning so I have the fitness facilities to myself. You're crazy, dude. I'd rather sleep. It wouldn't kill you to show a little more ambition, man. I'm sure it would impress some of the ladies, maybe even a special one. You've been trying to swoon for a while now. Kirishima gave him a knowing grin. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I'm all for charming the ladies, but there ain't no one, in particular, I'm gunning for. Kaminari leaned back on the sofa, closing his eyes in an attempt to play it cool. You're so full of shit, dude. Everybody knows you have the hots for Kayuka. Yeah, she's pretty cool, but that's about it. Kaminari waved him off. What about Midoriya and Uraraka, though? That lucky bastard. He was trying desperately to change the subject, but Kirishima didn't know that. I know, right? Uraraka is a cutie, that's for sure. What Minda did to him was funny as hell. It totally was, man. Best prank of the year, easily. Oh yeah, for sure. Kayuka seemed to enjoy the view, Kirishima acknowledged coyly, trying to bait his pal into a response. It worked. Kaminari's brow twitched and Kirishima could see the irritated look that he was trying to keep at bay. Touched a nerve, Kirishima chuckled at Kaminari's expense. Kaminari took a deep breath and arose from his seat. Nah man, I'm going to the fitness center. Kirishima chortled. You're too easy, Kaminari. All off. Kaminari flipped him off as he walked back to his room. If chiseled abs and big biceps are all I need to make me look cool in front of her, this'll be a piece of cake. Kayuka sat in her room, rewriting notes as a way to force herself to remember the course material. It was getting painfully boring and there was still a couple hours to kill before curfew. Kayuka leaned back in her desk chair to the point she nearly toppled over but managed to catch herself. Maybe she'd head out to the common area to socialize. If I'm lucky, I can make fun of Kaminari, she said aloud as she picked up her bass. Idly plucking away at the strings, she began to think. Some crazy shit has happened since I've been here at UA. I wonder if I'm really cut out for all of this nonsense. I wish heroics felt as right as music did. Kayuka snapped herself out of her trance and hauled on a UA sweater before heading out. She needed to break up her evening before her thoughts took over her. Kayuka was always painfully insecure about everything, and this was no different. She had a bad habit of doubting her own abilities, and it often leads her down the train of thought that questioned her potential as a hero. She arrived in the common area to find Kirishima, Mina, and Toru hanging out. Mina and Toru jumped in glee when they saw her walking towards them. Kyoyuka, I'm surprised you came out this evening. You've been a real stranger lately. Mina looked at her with a disappointed look. Yeah, I've been trying to study more, I guess, she laughed sheepishly. Well, it's good to see you come out, Kyoyuka. Us girls have missed you, Toru exclaimed, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her towards the sofas. Hey, us guys miss hanging out with you too, especially Kaminari. Kirishima whispered that last part just low enough that they could hear. The two girls out at the remark as Kirishima looked proud at what he had said. Kyoyuka gave him an indifferent look and shrugged. Kaminari is a total perv. He always gets sad when there are fewer girls to ogle. He's not that bad once you get to know him. He's just a fun-loving joker, Mina said to defend her friend. Mina and Kaminari were pretty close friends given that they were the two biggest underachievers in the class. Speaking of Kaminari, where is he? Toru asked. He hit the gym about 2 hours ago. I'd say he'll be back soon, Kirishima replied, knowing that he was the one who teased him into going. Kaminari the gym. Kyoyuka let out a guttural laugh. The idea of Kaminari actually working out was too funny to her. The other two girls giggled along with her. Kirishima shrugged, can't knock a guy for trying. What's so funny, guys? Kaminari snuck up on the lot of them and was wiping the sweat off of his face with his towel. Oh, nothing, peeped Toru. I have a question, Kaminari. Kyoyuka looked at the exhausted boy. Shoot. Does your brain fry when you lift weights too? If it does, that means I want to go next time to watch. Kyoyuka began to chuckle as Kaminari's brow twitched. Nah man, I can handle my own in the weight room. Kaminari puffed out his chest in an attempt to show off. The girl snorted at the remark, causing him to deflate like a balloon. Hey man, at least you're trying. I believe you killed it. Kirishima tried to salvage his mood before he got ticked off. Thanks, bro, I appreciate it. I'm gonna get a shower and go to bed. Kaminari walked away without making another sound, causing all of them to look at him quizzically. After he got out of sight, they all looked at each other and resumed the conversation. What's eating him? He seemed kinda sulky, Kyoyuka asked. No clue, maybe he's just exhausted from his workout, Mina replied confused. Streams of hot water trickled down his body, the steam curving around his figure. It had a serene feel to it, like all of his stress was being released and washed away down the drain. He was exhausted. He wasn't used to working out other than doing cardio. Weights had never been his thing at all. When he got to the gym, he found Ojiro, Sato, Bakugo, Shoji, and Siro. He thought it would be nice to work out with the guys, but boy was he wrong. He was outperformed in every single area by all of them. It was a physical mismatch that caused budding insecurity take over his body. What most people didn't know about Kaminari was that under all of that bravado and coolness was a guy who didn't think that highly of himself. His quirk reduced him to a giggling idiot. He wasn't physically impressive, nor was he an academic by any stretch. He felt run-of-the-mill average in every way and even underwhelming in some aspects. He persevered through his workout regardless because he was determined to be better. Watching the guys around him work so diligently inspired him to work harder. Initially, he had wanted to impress the girls of the class, especially Kyoyuka with a wide body befitting a cool guy such as himself. Maybe then he'd get the attention he always wanted. It seemed to work for Midoriya, so he didn't see why it wouldn't work for him. He soon realized just how hard it was to get to that point, and he developed a whole new respect for Midoriya after that. He must have busted his ass for a long time to get there, Kaminari thought as he rinsed the shampoo out of his hair. He'll get there too, he'll prove that I'm not useless. The comments in the common area only further fueled the insecurity he felt inside of the fitness center. Feelings of inadequacy crept over him, prickling all over his skin until he felt overwhelmed by it. A shroud of negative thought was broken by somebody entering the showers. It was actually two people, Bakugo and Kirishima. This is exactly what I needed after a long day, Kirishima exclaimed as the faucet squeaked, releasing hot water. Shut up, rocks for brains. I didn't see you at the gym this evening. I went this morning so I didn't feel like going. Yeah, I know that, dumbass, I was there. You usually go twice a day like me. I was hanging out with Kaminari for a bit and then a couple of the girls. Such a slacker. No wonder it's so easy to kick your ass. Speaking of Thunderhead, it made for a good laugh. That dumbass tried so hard but he couldn't even keep up with Zero. Pretty pathetic if you ask me. Kirishima chuckled nervously. Bakugo heard a loud slam against the shower wall. Kaminari, Kirishima called out. He knew someone else was in the shower, but he didn't really think about checking who it was. Not that it would have made any difference to Bakugo saying what he said. Yeah, got a problem? Short circuit. Yeah, I do. Well then, you want to do something about it, charge bolt, Bakugo said mockingly. After dealing with the constant attitude from everyone in his class, today was the day that Kaminari decided he had enough. Both of them stepped out of the shower and squared off with one another while Kirishima tried frantically to prevent what was about to happen next. "See on guys, this totally isn't necessary. Off Stonehenge, this is between me and Electabuzz over here. TCH, go yourself, Bakugo." The fight only lasted about 3 seconds. Kaminari thought he had the advantage since all of them had just stepped out of the shower, but before he could even react, the blitzing speed and reflexes Bakugo had were far too great. He took 2 point-blank explosions that rendered him unconscious. "Oh man, Bakugo, why did you have to go do that? We could get in so much shit for fighting." "I don't give a..." The Energizer Bunny over here was asking for it. He couldn't deal with it and tried to act like a man, so I showed him his place. Bakugo dried himself off and left the shower to find a small crowd outside, consisting of Mina, Kyoyuka, Shiro, Toru, and Ojiro. Mina was the first to ask what the hell happened in there. Lightning Rod tried to stand toe-to-toe with me, he asked for it. What the hell, Bakugo, Kyoyuka exclaimed. What the is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Go ask your boyfriend what his problem is, you stupid. That's a bit much, Bakugo, Ojiro and Toru responded. Bakugo only flipped them off in retort. Kyoyuka backed up and didn't know what to say to the boyfriend comment. Bakugo slung his towel over his shoulder and walked down the hallway as the class just stared. Eda rushed by him with the first aid kit, shooting him a nasty glance which Bakugo reciprocated. Kaminari and Kirishima came out before Ida went in, Kaminari's arm wrapped around his buddy's shoulder. Kirishima managed to get him to come to. Kaminari got dressed without a word and Kirishima caught him as he lost his balance. He heard the commotion going on outside and that only meant that he was going to have to hang his head in shame in front of the class. So not cool. Kaminari didn't look or speak with anybody in the class as he exited the showers. Even though Kyoyuka and Mina pleaded that he talks to them, he ignored them and refused to look them in the eye. Just let me bring him to his room, guys, Kirishima replied, his words laced with concern and empathy. The students just watched as he turned the corner, defeated. After bringing him back to his room, Kirishima came back to the common area where the group had been waiting patiently for answers. I don't know what was up with Kaminari. We were in the showers and Bakugo said something rude as he always does towards him and he went off. What did Bakugo say? Shiro asked. He mocked him for being weak at the gym. I didn't know Kaminari was in there with us until he slammed his fist into the shower stall. That's not like him at all, Toru said in bewilderment. He's usually so laid back, why would he get aggressive all of a sudden? The only explanation I can think of was that his manhood was being questioned. He probably had a rough day that was hard on his self-esteem and he finally blew his lid. Kyoyuka didn't know why, but Kirishima's words made her feel responsible. She wasn't sure if it was that or the fact that Kaminari refused to look at her as he passed by. She knew she was always making jokes at his expense and being snarky with him, but she never meant it other than playful banter. This black mass of guilt began to writhe and squirm inside of her stomach and she excused herself from the group. What's with her? Shiro asked. Oh my, Kyoyuka, Toru drifted worriedly. She turned to go after her but Ojiro stopped her. Let her be for now. Kaminari stared at his ceiling for an indeterminate amount of time. His eyes gazed upon the surface with such intensity that he could burn holes through the plaster. He was hurting, not only from the bruises on his skin, but his ego had been dealt a huge blow. Maybe Bakugo is right about me. Maybe I really am pathetic. He saw his phone light up and buzz from across the room. He didn't really want to answer it, but he forced himself to sit up despite his body's best efforts to keep him down. He looked at his phone screen. Kyoyuka, hey. Kaminari stared at the text for a moment, weighing out his options before deciding to respond. Kaminari, hey, what's up, girl? Kyoyuka, you don't have to act all cool. You alright? Kaminari, I'm not acting. Kyoyuka, Kaminari. Kaminari, what? Kyoyuka, are you okay? I'm being serious. I won't make fun of you. Kaminari, well, that's a change of pace. Kyoyuka, what's that supposed to mean? Kaminari, it's just that, never mind. Kyoyuka, alright then. Text me when you actually want to talk. Kaminari, KK. Him such an idiot, Kaminari thought. He didn't have the words and his natural instinct was to try to act cool in front of her instead of just being honest. He knew he was a dumbass and he probably only made things 10 times worse. On the other end, Kyoyuka was sat at the head of her bed, back against the wall, with her knees against her chin. She felt tremendously guilty for what had happened to Kaminari today. She began to think that maybe he didn't like all of her snide jokes. I didn't mean to hurt him. I think he's a great friend and all. I mean, I really like him and I hope he knows thought as a friend I like him as a friend, yeah. I hope he's okay and that he forgives me. I'm really sorry, Kaminari. The two of them drifted off to sleep at a late hour, dreading the day to come. Kaminari entered the 1A classroom before anyone else could arrive. As bodies piled in one after another, they all looked in astonishment at their yellow-haired friend. He was never in early, if anything he was almost always the last one to arrive. Word of the incident quickly spread amongst the class and most of the class felt sympathy for Kaminari. Bakugo obviously strutted in loud and proud as he always did, to the disdainful expressions of his classmates. Bakugo was used to this kind of treatment and his animalistic side hungered for the controversy. Are you morons staring at? He asked, his words doused with conceit. He knew what he did stirred up quite the ruckus amongst the class, but it only proved once again that he was the alpha male in his mind. Nobody was going to get in his way when it came to asserting his dominance as the future #1 hero. Kaminari wouldn't even make eye contact with the king of Explodo kills. He was far too embarrassed at what had happened. Him so unmanly, he thought, thinking of what his friend Kirishima might think of him backing down. Kyoyuka walked in right behind Bakugo and looked directly at Kaminari before quickly looking away and taking her seat. She really didn't want to come to class today. She prayed that she wouldn't have to see him and relive the emotions that engrossed her last night. Her eyes had dark circles that she attempted to cover up with makeup. Their severity was reduced, but they were still noticeable to anyone who was looking for them. The tension in the air was thick to the point that a knife would be incapable of cutting through it. The hair on the student's head stood with anticipation for the next interaction between the two. But it never came. Neither Kaminari or Bakugo made a single passing glance at each other throughout the day. Not even during heroics class, where they were on opposing teams. During the training drill, Bakugo acted as though Kaminari didn't even exist. Midoriya could see what was going on. Kaken deemed Kaminari irrelevant. He was no longer worth his time. He may as well consider himself non-existent in Kaken's world. He felt determined to talk to Kaminari after class, even though he was never the best at picking people up. After class was dismissed for the day, 1A walked down the path in groups as they always did on their way back to their dorms. There were some variations in the groups, but one of the notable changes was that Kaminari was dragging behind the lot, which was never the case. Kaminari was always talking to his friends or failing to smooth talk the girls of 1A into his arms on the way home. Midoriya looked his girlfriend in the eyes, who he always walked back with, and said I'm going to hang back and talk to Kaminari-san. You go on ahead and hang out with the girls, babe. Uraraka just nodded subtly, mouth slightly open in affection and wonder. She still couldn't get used to the fact that Deku-kun was her boyfriend, calling her things like babe and sweetheart. She blushed a vibrant red as he gave her a peck on the cheek before heading off. Mina saw Uraraka walking alone and immediately joined her, wrapping her bubblegum pink arm around her shoulder. Hey, what's up Ura-san, are you blushing? OMG, that's adorable. Shoo up Mina. Uraraka clasped her mouth shut at her accent escaping her. Mina just snorted in response. It's not funny, Uraraka insisted, but Mina couldn't control her hysterical laughter. Kaminari looked up from the rock he was kicking along the path to see Midoriya approaching him. He probably forgot something back in class. Kaminari was surprised when his green-haired pal began to walk alongside him. Hey, everything all right? Oh, yeah man, I'm doing great. HM, you don't seem to be doing fine. You don't have to act all nonchalant with me, I won't judge, I promise. Well, I guess I could be better. Want to talk about it? Kaminari hesitated for a minute before opening his mouth to speak. Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough, like you just didn't belong and everyone else around you is just better in every way? More than you know. I spent my whole life feeling that way. Really doesn't it, man? It does, but coming to UA gave me a chance to prove that I am somebody, and I'm really grateful I got the chance to do that in front of such amazing people. If anything, it went the opposite direction for me. I was much more popular and looked far more badass before coming here. You don't think you're popular or strong? I beg to differ. I think you're awesome. Well, I can tell I'm not popular amongst the ladies. Kaminari chuckled. As for being strong, I feel like I'm the weakest guy here. I don't like being mean to anybody at all, but you really think that you're weaker than mine? Midoriya tried to stifle a chuckle. Kaminari smiled a toothy grin. Goddamn, I forgot all about mine. I guess I'm not the weakest after all. AACHOO. Damn allergies, Minta exclaimed off in the distance. I don't know about the girls, but I know that the guys in the class like you, Kaminari-san. Thanks, Midoriya man, I appreciate that. Wanna go play pool when we get back to the dorm? I'm sorry, I can't. Midoriya rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly with a pink hue becoming his cheeks. Oh, I get it. Spending time with your girl, how you dog? Kaminari patted him on the back while Midoriya just fidgeted nervously. Yeah, I'm going with her off campus to the mall. That's what's up, dude. Kaminari chortled. You're a lucky man, Midoriya. Yeah, I don't know how you managed to pull getting Uraraka. Not that you aren't a great dude or anything, it was just kind of surprising that it all happened so fast. Yeah, I guess I'm lucky. What about you and Kyoyuka-san? Kaminari was visibly shaken by Midoriya's question. There's nothing going on between Kyoyuka and me. We're just friends. Midoriya eyed him suspiciously. But I thought that you liked her, he inquired with his hand on his chin in deep thought. Well, you're wrong, Kaminari quickly blurted out, and he immediately apologized for his rude outburst. Midoriya laughed heartily at his friend's response. I'll see you later, Kaminari. Midoriya began to run ahead before turning back, and good luck with Kyoyuka-san. Kaminari belligerently yelled out after Midoriya, but to no avail. Midoriya wouldn't have made any sense of his words even if he did hear him. With Midoriya's kind words relieving his insecurities, he decided to hit up the fitness center again this evening. He wasn't about to give a damn about what anybody had to say about him. He was going to improve himself regardless. Kyoyuka was sipping away at her iced tea in her room, meticulously scanning every word in her textbook in preparation for the upcoming test. The temptation to kick back and play her bass was ever-growing, and the urge was only strengthened by the stress she felt throughout the day. Music was always her go-to when she felt stressed out or anxious. Maybe she needed to take a break from studying and get back to what she enjoys doing most. Kyoyuka began playing an original tune that she had been writing, switching between bass and guitar to find the best sound that accommodated both instruments when she heard a knock on the door. I wonder who that could be. She opened the door to find a sweaty Kaminari on the other side. Hey, what's up, sweet thing? Kaminari winked at her, still wiping the sweat out of his hair with his towel. Not much, just studying. Would it kill you to take a shower first before coming here? Kyoyuka pinched her nose in disgust at his gym smell. My bad, he chuckled. I know you aren't studying though. I could hear you playing your bass when I walked by the front of the building. Your window was open. Kaminari gestured to the window that Kyoyuka forgot to close before she began playing. Kyoyuka always shut her window and tried to make sure nobody was on her floor when she was writing. She was a bit of a shootin' when it came to her music and didn't often share it with anybody. At the revelation that her music notes were leaking out into the world around her, she turned a pinkish hue and shut the window immediately. Something wrong, Kyo? And I know, it's nothing. Don't tell me you're embarrassed about your music. I noticed that you don't play very much around others. You shouldn't hide it, it's rad, girl. Kayuka could feel the warmth stir under her cheeks at the compliment. She had never been good at taking compliments, so her natural response was to retort sarcastically. Well, you could probably do something too if you didn't fry your brain every time you tried too hard. Ouch, that cuts deep, Kaio. Kaminora's hands shot up in defense. I am only teasing him, sorry. Don't worry about it, it's cool. I think you should keep working on your music. You could be an amazing musician if you wanted to. Kayuka's eyes scanned Kaminora's warm expression for a little longer than she'd like to admit. Looking at him there with his towel wrapped around his shoulders, sweaty from the gym, should have been repulsing, but seeing his genuine self made her unsure of what to feel. Seeing him be himself without trying to be the cool guy was a real punch in the gut. She liked this Kaminari, but she would never acknowledge that. Kaminari, feeling the awkward shift, broke the silence. I should go hit the shower, I guess. It was rad talking to you, Kaio. Yeah, I'll see you later. She watched as he turned the corner, almost closing her door on his fingers when he poked his head back in, causing her to jump and squeal. Kaminari burst into laughter, trying to force his words between giggles. Would you help me study English? I just did it and I figured you might be able to help me a bit. Sure, sounds good. Tomorrow at 600 p.m. Kayuka didn't know what she was saying. She loved spending her evenings studying alone. She panicked at his question and just said the first thing that came to mind. It's a date, see you then. Gorgeous Kaminari winked at her as he disappeared from her doorway. Date, she asked weakly, long after Kaminari had turned tail. What had she gotten herself into? Kaminari arose at the first glimpse of sunlight, unlike anything he had ever done before. He was filled to the brim with exuberant energy and he was prepared to use it. Something about today made him feel lighter than air, and the spring in his step was an excellent indicator of that. He woke up early enough that he caught Kirishima on his way to the fitness center, much to Red Riot's surprise. Whoa, what the hell are you doing up so early, man? You're never up this early. It's 500 a.m. for God's sake. I don't know what it is, bro. I just feel supercharged today and I figured I'd hit up the gym. Saw that solemnly. Kirishima clenched his fist in front of him as rivers of proud tears formed from his eyes. I'm so proud of you for taking the gym so seriously. What happened though, really? Yeah, I guess I got a bit of a wake-up call. Kirishima vigorously patted Kaminara's back in praise as they made their way to the fitness center together. Conversely, Kayuka woke up in a jittery mess. Her every nerve was frayed and she was at her wit's end trying to assemble an outfit to wear after class. She had faded in and out of sleep throughout the night with the same dream jostling her out of her slumber. It was as if her brain was trying to play out the events that could potentially happen this evening. Every single dream ended in the same way, with Kaminara's face just a little too close to hers. After exhausting the entire inventory of her closet, she ruffled her hair like a maniac and groaned loudly. Loudly enough that she heard a knock on her door. Everything all right in there? It's Momo. Shit, Kayuka thought. If she catches me with my entire wardrobe strung across my room, she'll know something is up. Hey, you okay? I know you're in there. Ugh, Momo, why do you have to be so persistent? That's so uncool. Uncool? I'm starting to talk like that dumbass Noah. Just a second, Kayuka called out, desperately trying to gather a pile of clothes and fire them in her closet as quickly as possible. She didn't have time to retrieve all of the articles, so she only opened the door a peek to answer her. Yeah, what's up? I just heard you groan and I thought something might be the matter. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Can I come in? Kayuka froze. Shit, if I say no she's gonna be suspicious, but if she comes in she'll know I'm trying to put together an outfit for something. Who, I guess, she responded sheepishly, allowing Momo to see the expanse of clothing strung messily across her dorm room. My God, Kayuka, you need to clean your room, Momo stated sternly, giving her a judging stare. I can't believe that you'd just throw your dirty clothes all over the place. That's disgusting. They aren't dirty, Kayuka blurted out, instantly noticing the shift in Momo's expression. Oh, she purred coyly. Then why did you rip your closet apart, she asked, leaning in and closing the gap between them. She couldn't decide on what to wear after class. Why would you be fretting about that this early? Momo's eyes widened in mock curiosity. She knew that she was narrowing in on the answer she was expecting. You are not the type to really worry about what you wear. Kayuka cursed Momo's excellent detective skills to the deepest depths of her soul. I don't know, I'm just unsure what to wear today. I think my appearance is getting repetitive, she exclaimed, proud of her excuse, but upon examination of Momo's smirk, she knew she wasn't exactly convincing. Kayuka hung her head in defeat as Momo gave her an impatient look that screamed spit it out already. I'm helping Kaminari study tonight and I don't want to look like a slob. She winced at the upcoming reaction of her vice class rep. Momo put her hands on both of her shoulders and shot her a beaming smile. It's about damn time here. Let me help you pick out what to wear. Kayuka looked bewildered as she watched Momo brush past her and dig through her things without a shred of shame. Well, you two are just going to be studying, so you don't want to wear anything too fancy, but at the same time all these band shirts don't exactly scream me, Momo chirped teasingly, looking back at her friend with a smug demeanor. Kayuka's cheeks turned a pinkish hue at the statement. KK, we're just going to study. She clenched her two fists in protest, but Momo just laughed throatily in response. I know, but we both know you want him to, she said in a sing-song voice which only made Kayuka's face shift from pink to a deep shade of crimson. Kyoyuka cleared her throat, composing herself. No, I don't want him to me. I'm just helping him out and we're good friends. TFFFFT, yeah right, you totally have a crush on him. It's why you always give him such a hard time, isn't it? And I know I do that because it's funny and he's an easy target because he's an idiot. Yeah, Momo drifted off before reaching an epiphany. Okay, so I'm not supposed to do this because it goes against my family code, but I'll make an exception just to help you out this once. What are your dimensions? Kyoyuka, taken back at the question, didn't know how to respond. Don't know. Momo created a measuring tape using her quirk and invaded Kyoyuka's personal space without as much as requesting to do so. Kyoyuka jumped at her, measuring her body. Oh, what are you doing? I'm just measuring you, don't be such a baby. Kyoyuka loathed her body. She hated the fact that she was underdeveloped compared to the rest of her female classmates. She didn't have a big bust or a curvy figure, and her ass was barely outside of the realm of flat. This was one of the biggest deterrents in admitting that Kaminari could like her. He always flirted with women, most of whom were more shapely than her. She thought for a while he only hit on her to make her feel included, which she despised. She didn't understand how any guy would see her and think, damn, I want her so bad, but unbeknownst to her, that's exactly what Kaminari thought on a regular basis. Kyoyuka felt the heat rush to her face as Momo measured her bust and her hips. Momo happened to be one of the curviest women she ever met, even comparing to the likes of Midnight, who was known for her appeal. She waited for a moment where her friend's seriousness would slip and reveal her chuckling, mocking her inferior form. Momo remained totally professional to her surprise and didn't seem judgmental in the slightest. Upon finishing the measurements, she conjured up a nice blouse and a sleek pair of skinny jeans to go along with them. I know you aren't exactly the dress type, so I tried to do something that would make you look presentable while also still being you. Kyoyuka snapped to attention. So, my clothes don't make me look presentable. Momo staggered back at the question. She didn't mean any harm, it just kind of slipped out. And I know, not at all, it's just that I forget it. It's just not my style of fashion, she shrugged. Kyoyuka appreciated her bluntness and didn't take it to heart. Thanks a lot, Momo. I'm grateful you came. Momo just smiled in response as she began to walk towards the exit. Before she left the doorway, she looked back at her rocker chick friend and a mischievous smile graced her face. Don't do anything that Midoriya and Uraraka wouldn't do. Kyoyuka audibly gulped and her jaw unhinged. Momo burst into hysterical laughter as she strutted away from the room. Achu, Midoriya and Uraraka both sneezed from their respective rooms. Damn allergies. The two of them couldn't stop stealing glances at each other as the day wore on. They were unsure if anybody was watching them, but quite frankly they didn't care. Their desire to gaze upon the other person was like an addiction they desperately needed to satiate. A select few classmates picked up on the interactions between the two, and nothing but a gratifying upturn of the lips took place. The class was very much aware of what was going on between the two of them. Not because Momo ran around telling everyone, but because they could sense the arcing electricity that surged between the two of them. They noticed it more than the two lovebirds in question did. Even Aizawa-sensei took brief, uninterested glances at the two and wondered to himself, is it something in the water first, Midoriya and Uraraka, now this? On the way back to the dorms, neither of them got too close to one another. In an attempt to mask their plans for the night, they blended in with their usual crowds, holding their typical topics of discussion. A few of the keener classmates eyed them almost arrogantly, waiting for them to slip up. Mina muled any plans tonight? Kyoyuka-san, her words were filled with intent. Nah, not really. Just gonna chill out and study as always. Oh come on, that's so boring, you gotta be doing something else. Studying all the time will make you a lame bookworm like Momo or Ida. Hey, I take offense to that, Momo snarled at their pink classmate. Momo knew the truth behind her plans this evening and smirked knowingly, but remained silent to respect Kyoyuka. Well, I for one think you've been acting funny the last couple days. Toru voiced her opinion, to which all the girls began scanning Kyoyuka for any weakness in her composure. Why would you say that? Kyoyuka was doing her damnedest to play it cool until she could break free from the pack, away from their analytic eyes. Well, you were kind of staring at Kaminari all day, Tsuyu stated matter-of-factly, causing Kyoyuka's stride to stutter. I wasn't staring, or even looking. I don't know what you're talking about. The girls all scoffed in unison. They were so nosy, and Kyoyuka was unfortunately on the receiving end of their hungering curiosity. She had to get out of there before her face betrayed her. I really gotta go to the bathroom. Excuse me, guys. Kyoyuka ran off. She could see that the dorm wasn't that far away, so it was a plausible excuse. Kaminari was receiving the same kind of treatment from the guys, albeit to a lesser degree since the guys didn't care as much about trivial things. So, have you ate her yet? Mineta asked nonchalantly, with one eye open. What kind of uncool question is that, bro? Unlike Kyoyuka, Kaminari was far more animated. Just thought I'd ask. I'll take that as a no. Mina shrugged, causing Kaminari's hair to stand on end in frustration. Gonna hit up the gym this evening with me, Kaminari? Kirishima asked, trying to pry out of him whether or not he had plans. Nah, not tonight. I'm falling behind on some studying and I gotta catch up. You study now? I'm certain that society is going to crumble. Ida didn't crack jokes very often, but the thought of Kaminari studying was hilarious. Whatever man, I'm just trying to pass, all right. Well, I think it's a good thing you're trying so hard, Midoriya sheepishly added to the conversation, Uraraka in tow. He offered her to go ahead with her female classmates, but she didn't want to let go of his hand to both of their embarrassment. The class awed in unison at them. It felt like an eternity-long interrogation, but the two of them managed to make it back to the dorms relatively unscathed. Irritated, yes, but nobody caught wind of their plans to study this evening. The two of them would have laughed if they realized just how identical their routines were prior to their study date. Both of them showered, shaved, brushed their teeth, put on their outfits, used cologne, perfume, and waited at the edge of their bed impatiently for 600 p.m. to roll around. At about 5:45 p.m., Kaminari slung his backpack strap over his left shoulder and sauntered out of the room. He tried to look as inconspicuous as he possibly could as he crossed over through the common area so that neither of the few classmates who were hanging out there would stop him. Just when he thought he was in the clear, he heard a voice call out behind him and he cringed. "Where do you think you're going dressed like that?" Mina prodded. He looked back to see her resting her arms and head on the back of the couch, eyeing him playfully. She was referring to the semi-formal attire that Kaminari would never be caught dead in. A nice button-up shirt, sleek jeans, and a pair of shoes that weren't worn and ratty. Definitely suspicious in the minds of his classmates. Heading over to the library, he responded quickly, with indifference. "Why do you need to dress up to go to the library? Do you have the hots for the librarian?" she asked coyly, eyebrows shifting to represent her eagerness to tease her friend. "Maybe I do," Kaminari shrugged, "but I'm gonna get going before they shut the place down for the night." He had to keep it short and sweet because he really didn't want to be late getting over there. Hopefully, his neutral attitude would deter her from prying any further. "Ugh, you're no fun, Kay." Kaminari revealed a toothy grin and turned his back to the lot, waving back at them. "Don't wait up." Kayuka could feel her heart thump erratically within the confines of her rib cage. She had absolutely no idea how the hell she was going to keep herself together. Her breathing hitched, her ears were ablaze, and most notably, her cheeks were capable of guiding Santa's sleigh. She had no idea what possessed her to doll herself up. She seldom used makeup, and when she did, it was minimal. There were rare occasions where she would surprise everyone with her talents. These stemmed from her years of heavy makeup use in tribute to her rock idols. It made her quite gifted with the tools at her disposal. All she knew was that this was not her casual look, and she knew he would see through her in an instant. The real question was, did she want him? The thoughts of potential outcomes made her stomach flip and her thighs shut. Just as she felt like she was going to throw up, she heard it. Knock, knock, knock. "Come in." The first thing she saw was the trademark golden hair poke into the room. Had he brushed it, it wasn't the disheveled mess that she was used to seeing. She noticed that he, himself, was dressed up. The surprise eased her tensions regarding her own appearance. "Thank God he had up too. He looks good though. What am I thinking?" "Hey, ready to get to it?" Kaminari deadpanned. She thought he was disappointed in the way she looked, but that couldn't be further from the truth. He was fighting the urge to scour every inch of her being from head to toe with his eyes. He maintained eye contact to maintain some shred of self-control. The last thing he wanted to do was confirm her opinion on him being a total pervert and scare her off. "You look nice tonight," he remarked offhandedly, catching Kayuka off guard. Thanks." "You too." She looked down at his feet to see shoes that she didn't recognize. Typically he wore sneakers that were just a tad too worn, and she gave him shit about throwing them out numerous times. "About time you wore some decent footwear." "I didn't throw them out if that's what you're thinking, just wearing a different pair tonight." "Can you wear those every day instead of wearing those other ugly-ass sneakers?" "Ouch, Kaio. You know I love those," he chuckled, infecting Kayuka with the desire to do so as well. The two of them sat on the edge of the bed, meticulously going over the notes together. She would answer any questions that he had to the best of her ability and try not to get caught up in his golden-colored eyes. They continued this way, awkwardly, as if they were a couple of infants trying to get their bearings. They'd occasionally make fleeting glances at the other person without their knowledge, their desire bubbling within them, yet they were both blissfully unaware of the budding tension between them. Neither of them could really remember what he had said. Kaminari looked up and asked a question, catching Kayuka staring at him in the process. Before, he would stare at his sheet and ask questions without making eye contact, and she would answer him in the same manner. Now, she had been caught stealing glances at him the same way that he had been doing to her throughout the evening. The two of them just stared into each other's eyes for an indeterminate amount of time. It's like they were locked in a time loop and they would never go another second without having fixed their gaze onto each other's widened orbs. Kaminari watched as Kayuka's lips innocently parted and an embarrassed hue overtook her cheeks. He felt his cheeks betray him as well, signifying his embarrassment at the situation. This was not how he was supposed to portray himself in front of her. He had to prove to her he was cool. But the way she looked at him set off something in his head. Maybe he didn't need to act cool in front of her, maybe all he needed was to be himself. He scoffed internally at the corny epiphany, but he rolled with it nonetheless. The increasing gravity between their staring contest got to the point that his body began to act on its own. She saw him pulling closer and closer to her and froze. She was totally unsure of what to do next. This was exactly like all of her dreams, but it always ended abruptly when it got to this part. She prayed that this was another dream, but she knew better. Here he was, mere inches from her face, and she was sure that her heart was prepared to break free from its prison at any moment. She counted backwards to try and relax herself as time almost seemed to stand still. 321. His lips crashed into hers, and suddenly they became a whirling vortex of intimacy and lust. The notes were fired to the floor and they ambled around clumsily trying to get into a better position on her bed, their lips never separating for even a moment. The need for oxygen eventually became so dire that they forced themselves apart, but not for too long before resuming. They couldn't think now, they couldn't start second-guessing themselves. It was just the two of them, their bodies colluding to create a cacophony of passion and desire. They both craved this and they knew it. Kaminari's lips felt scorching to the touch. It was as if he threw gasoline on her and set her alight. Her clothes made her feel far too warm and she tugged at his shirt before beginning to unbutton it in her uncontrollable thirst. He was shocked at her boldness, almost reveling in the fact that he had awakened the beast within. He chuckled to himself, and in that moment he wasn't anticipating that she would take over and pin him to the mattress, hovering over him as he watched in awe. He watched as he peeled off her clothes, revealing more and more of her milky white skin. He felt his mouth go unbearably dry at the sight. He needed to press his lips to every inch of her form. He needed her body to quench his thirst. There she was, before him in nothing but a matching set of bra and panties, still atop of him. Without thinking twice, he positioned himself so that she was straddling his face as she gasped, uncertain of what he was planning next. She yelped in protest as his finger touched the hem of her panties, tracing along until he reached where her flower was covered. Before she could get the words out, he pressed his tongue to the outside of the soaked fabric and she released a guttural moan that made a smirk cross the boy's face. Trying to regain her composure, she once again made an attempt to speak, but she felt him slide the fabric to one side, exposing her heat to him. Her cheeks were burning with not only embarrassment but with lust. She wanted him to stop, but the insatiable wetness that begged for his touch implored him to continue. She felt his tongue work around her mound with such delicate swirling motions, with such grace and finesse that it shocked her. He was amazingly good, and she bit her lip to the point she almost made it bleed to contain the euphoria within. Every once in a while, a swipe of the tongue would cause a fraction to leak out into the room, displacing the heavy silence. He would occasionally vigorously on her bundle of nerves, causing her to convulse and put her hands against the wall to steady herself. She thanked God for the wall. She had to keep herself upright, otherwise she definitely would have fell. Her legs were far too weak to hold herself up, and the support was a necessity. The biggest shocker was when she began to instinctively grind her hips, using his mouth to push her closer to the undeniable orgasm that was lurking around the corner. She could feel herself getting closer, intensity ramping up as she increased her gyrations. She felt him moan in pleasure underneath her as if he was getting off at the sight of her lose herself. She made a mental note to hit him later. As he fervently worked her over with his mouth, the two of them were far too distracted to hear the knock on the outside of the door or the sound of the doorknob clicking as it opened. Kayuka had forgot to lock the door since she left it open for when Kaminari swung by. Her body desperately clung onto the realm of reality as she quivered vehemently against his mouth. She moaned his name in indulgence and ran her hands through his hair aggressively as she tried to ground herself. As her orgasm came to an end, they both heard a voice and jolted out of the lustful world they created. "Hey Kai, oh my god." Kayuka shrieked and grabbed for the covers in desperation to cover her body, while Kaminari sat himself upright and looked at Mina like a deer caught in headlights. Mina covered her eyes as if to wait for the two of them to get decent when Kayuka screamed at her, "Get out, Mina," and threw a pillow in her direction. Mina always had a bad habit of barging in unannounced, and she was a major reason that Kayuka always kept her door locked. Mina took the hint and ran out, giggling at what she had just witnessed. She couldn't wait to tell everyone this juicy piece of gossip. Shit, Kaminari trailed as Kayuka was still straddling him, so dumbstruck by disbelief that she hadn't moved an inch. Kayuka finally came to her senses and looked right into Kaminari's eyes. Her face warped into one of irritation and disgust. "This is all your fault." "My fault? What the hell do you mean that this is my fault? You came in here and made a move on me, and I was so distraught with trying to calm myself down I forgot to lock the door. You can't blame me for you forgetting to lock the door. You know as well as I do that you wanted this." Kayuka remained silent and refused to look at him. This only ticked Kaminari off further, but he quickly realized the predicament they were in and steeled himself. He took her chin in his hand and guided her to look at him despite her protest before pressing his lips against hers again. She could taste her own fluids of orgasm, and it was something she never did before, but it made her tighten her legs' grip around his waist. "I'm sorry, Kaio." "You should be," she grumbled back in response, feigning anger. Kaminari just smiled at her gently and she couldn't help but reciprocate. "Well, we should probably get dressed and be ready to explain ourselves." Kayuka's face sizzled with shame. "I can't go out there now, I'm just gonna stay here." "Forever?" he asked with an eyebrow ed. "Forever," she replied. "You're being ridiculous." He laughed before picking her up as he got off the bed, causing her to yelp. "Fine, I'll go, but don't expect me to say anything." "That's fine with me also. I didn't realize you were such a pervert." He grinned toothily at Kayuka before receiving a smack upside the head with the very textbook he brought to her room. "Son of a," he yelled, cupping the lump that was forming on his head. "Serves you right." Kayuka smiled triumphantly, the book still in hand. "Idiot. I know what we just did, but do you want to go out sometime?" Kayuka stumbled and dropped the book at his question, and she cleared her throat. "Yeah, why not? How about tomorrow evening? It is said tomorrow, so." "It's a date." He uttered the very words that had her in such a panic all day, but this time she couldn't help but smile sheepishly at him. Here was absolutely no way in hell that Kayuka could possibly face her class after what Mina had seen. Kayuka loved Mina dearly as a friend, but she knew that her pink-pigmented classmate thrived on gossip. Of all people, it had to be Mina. I wouldn't even care if she caught us doing anything else. Why couldn't she catch us or something? This is just the worst. She already couldn't help but feel like what she had done with Kaminari was trashy. She was petrified that he would think less of her for putting out so easily. She was so ashamed of herself for succumbing to her temptations and allowing her defenses to crumble without even a shred of resistance. That said, she knew there was no way around the fact that he made her feel boundless pleasure she had never felt before in her life. Some way, somehow, she was determined to feel that same euphoria again. She had a bad habit of fidgeting with her earjacks when her anxiety struck. Thoughts of their electrifying moment and immense fear of her classmates' scrutinizing faces plagued her mind. Her natural defense mechanism was always her relentless sarcasm. She could always snark her way out of a jam. She knew that it wouldn't be enough this time around. Oh God, what if it gets back to the teachers? Well, be killed. Kaminari had just made it back to his own room when his phone buzzed. Kayuka already damn, im good. Kaminari chortled with a grin that stretched ear to ear. Kayuka im kinda freaked out about Mina. Kaminari, I didn't see anybody from class on my way back to my room. Maybe she didn't tell any of them. Kayuka, you know better than that, man. Mina couldn't keep her mouth shut if it was sewn together. Kaminari, I know. I'm just trying to be positive. Besides, what's the big deal? We had fun, didn't we? Kayuka, that's not the point, dumbass. Did you use your quirk before typing out that text? Kaminari, wow, rude Kaio. Well, tell me what the harm is then. Kayuka, if word gets out about us doing it could get back to the teachers. You saw how pissed Aizawa-sensei was with Midoriya and Uraraka-san. Kaminari, I don't think I could handle that kind of punishment. Being away from you all day would be torture. Kayuka, shut up. Kaminari, you already know the quickest way to shut me up. Kayuka blushed violently before throwing her phone on the bed and promptly picking it up again. Kaminari, I bet that made you blush. He was right. She hated that he was. Kayuka, you wish when you decide to get your mind out of the gutter you can tell me where we're going on Sere. Kaminari, I haven't really thought that far ahead. Shrug. Kayuka, sigh, I should've expected that. Text me when you figure it out. Kaminari, alright, cool. Well, chat later, cutie. Kayuka hugged later. Kaminari lid back on his bed as he surfed the web for date ideas. He had to make the first one a memorable one. He wouldn't outright say it to her because it's uncool, but she did really mean a lot to him. He shook his head at the thought and tried to come up with something fun that she'd enjoy. Mina scoured the campus looking for anybody that she could share this shocking turn of events with. She knew it was getting closer and closer to curfew, meaning fewer ears to share this delectable news with. Mina knew that she could text, but she just couldn't get the same amount of oomph behind as she could in person. Besides, she absolutely adored people's reactions to crazy gossip. It never once occurred to her how much damage she could cause. Not because she's malevolent, but because she's naive. She never meant any harm. She only ever told gossip because it was a breath of excitement. She tried the 1A dorm lounge for the umpteenth time before she finally found someone. The other new couple on campus, Uraraka and Midoriya. Without hesitation, she bolted towards them. Guys, you are never going to believe what I just saw. She was bouncing up and down as if she were attached to a spring. Midoriya and Uraraka were overwhelmed by her fervorous enthusiasm. They exchanged a timid glance with each other before looking back at an exuberant Mina. What did you see? Midoriya took the first step, sheepishly asking. Well, I was going to go see Kayuka to see if I could borrow some of her notes or get her to help me study or whatever, right? Yeah, Uraraka asked innocently. When I opened the door, Kayuka was straddling Kaminari's face almost completely naked. The skin of the two skittish teenagers took on the same pinkish hue as the girl before them. You should probably keep that to yourself, Mina. Midoriya stuttered, thinking about his and Uraraka's own promiscuous adventures. You are no fun, Midoriya-san. Yura-san. Uraraka wouldn't make eye contact with either of them because she was too embarrassed of her own experiences. How could she say anything when she knew exactly how exhilarating, how lustful, how blissful it felt? Images of Midoriya's sparkling green eyes looking up at her to gauge the pleasure that contorted her face flashed before her eyes. She felt herself getting hot under the collar and increasingly needy by the second. Mina, understanding that she wasn't about to get the astonished expression she was hoping for, waved her hand dismissively and ran off. Perhaps I'd have better luck at the gym. Midoriya looked over his shoulder to make sure Mina had turned the corner when he felt a delicate finger trace along his jawline. With a gulp, he turned to face his lover, who bore a face he knew too well. He could see the searing flush across her cheeks, the seductive gaze that turned not only his soul into stone, and the heart-melting purr he had become accustomed to. Deku-kun, Uraraka called coyly, a finger playing with the buttons on his shirt. Yeah, Uraraka-san. What Kayuka-san and Kaminari-san did was really something, wasn't it? Yeah, I was thinking that maybe I could use that right about Enhei before she could finish her sentence. Midoriya jumped up and was dragging her by the hand to his room. She giggled in victory because she knew that she'd be in the thralls of pleasure before too long. Mina sprinted gleefully down the dirt path. The gym was the obvious place to look for her classmates. Fortunately for her, she knew that most of her class were overachievers, minus herself and Kaminari, who spent the majority of their spare time either working out or studying. Mina couldn't understand their prudish, lame behavior, but that's besides the point. Right now she just had to tell somebody who would listen. That's when she saw it. the spiked red hair of one of her bros. She was drawn to it much like a ship is drawn to a lighthouse. He was a beacon of hope on this foggy day. Of course, that would be an exaggeration to justify her partaking in frivolous gossip, but it was important to Mina at least. Hey Kirishima, Mina waved jovially as she ran to his side. What's happening, Mina? Kirishima could read the vivacious expression overtaking her face. Knowing her from their middle school days definitely meant that her excitement had to be attributed to some cool new move she created, or Kirishima cringed. Gossip. Kirishima always tried to be everyone's friend. He is undoubtedly one of the friendliest people in Class 1A, even managing to befriend Bakugo of all people, which he is secretly quite proud of. That said, even he enjoyed a little gossip from time to time but tried not to let that side of him surface easily. You're never gonna believe what I saw, dude. Oh yeah, what's that? Kirishima deadpanned, trying to look disinterested to dissuade her from going any further. Well, I went to Kaioyuka's room to ask her if I could borrow some notes or maybe get a little help or something. Yeah, and I walked in on her and Kaminari. Kirishima staggered back in surprise. Doing what exactly? He nervously asked. He knew that he shouldn't be delving deeper into the rabbit hole, but his damn nosy side couldn't help but make an appearance. I walked in and she was totally straddling his face and she was practically naked. Kirishima couldn't even contain his immense disbelief. No way, man, that's crazy. I know, right? Mina exclaimed excitedly, knowing that he was just as blown away as she was. I knew that he had a crush on her, but I didn't expect this to happen so suddenly. What am? And Kirishima clenched his fist, gritted his teeth, and let the waterworks flow freely in pride for his bro. It wasn't an uncommon sight for most of Class 1A. Mina waved her hand and laughed nervously. Yeah, whatever. I bet everyone else would be totally stunned. I'd say, but we gotta keep it on the down low so they won't get in trouble, okay? Mina looked disappointed. But what's the point of knowing something as unbelievable as this if you can't tell anyone? Simon, Mina, we could get them in serious trouble. But he'll be super duper careful so that they don't get caught. Kirishima just sighed because he knew he wasn't going to make any headway on this front. Just don't tell anyone. Fine, Mina drawled. Kirishima didn't believe her for a second. Little did they know that their resident bald-headed midget was within earshot of their conversation. That bastard. Everybody from 1A was walking home from a seemingly typical day at UA, well, as typical as a day at UA could be. Most of them were walking within their usual friend groups. Ida was third-wheeling with Midoriya and Uraraka. Kirishima was the only one who would walk with Bakugo. And the remainder of the guys and girls walked in their own separate groups that didn't stop Kaminari and Kaioyuka from making fleeting glances at each other from a distance. The majority of the class took notice, and both Kaminari and Kaioyuka could feel the smugness permeate the air. Something catching your eye, Momo asked Kaioyuka, tilting down her designer sunglasses. And I know, why would you say that? Well, there wouldn't be much reason to look over your shoulder, would there, unless you're paranoid about something, Toru exclaimed with whatever expression she had on her face. Kaioyuka couldn't tell. I heard that you, bought a new chair, Kaioyuka, Mina stated loudly and offset. Kaioyuka's razor-edged glare fixated on Mina with the sharpness of serrated knives, while her face simultaneously burned with the ferocity of 1,000 suns. Her crimson glow signaled the attention of all their other classmates. Little did she know, Mina hadn't told anybody after Kirishima due to his insistence on keeping things quiet. Mina didn't deliberately throw Kaioyuka to the wolves. She more or less meant it as a teasing gesture that was meant to be an inside joke, but that wasn't how things worked out. The class stopped and gathered around the rocker chick, intrigued to find out whatever dirty little secret that Kaioyuka was keeping locked away from them. As the crowd amassed, Kaioyuka felt her stomach grow tight. Her heart was beating at a ludicrous rate. She couldn't believe that Mina had put her on the spot like this. It was the first time ever that she was truly outraged with a classmate. She opened her mouth and she just couldn't seem to force out the words to diffuse the situation. If only she could make some snide joke, then all of this would blow over. Her mouth was dry and she was self-conscious that her breathing was shallow. She was having a panic attack in front of her classmates. She couldn't allow them to see her have a breakdown like this. It would be far too embarrassing. She tried vehemently to fight it, but the tantalizing paralysis of anxiety had disavowed most of her brain function, leaving her with nothing but a looking glass to witness everything unfold around her. A familiar grip on her shoulder dragged her back within the confines of reality. You okay? Kaminari asked her quietly as the class watched them both intently. Kaioyuka just nodded, but it wasn't exactly convincing. Before Kaminari could open his mouth to speak, he felt a shoulder bump him. Bakugo grew indifferent to the events taking place, and Kaminari happened to be in his way. It was undoubtedly an intentional move to assert himself as the dominant male, as he had done in the showers a week prior. It appealed to his sadistic sense of pride that fueled his desire to become the top hero. It wasn't the bump, nor was it his bruised ego that caused Kaminari to snap. It was the fact that Kaioyuka was clearly in distress, and Bakugo had the nerve to not only ignore that but show blatant insincerity for himself and for her situation. His body responded to his primal rage and moved instinctively towards Bakugo. Bakugo felt a hard tug on his shoulder, and as he turned his head he simultaneously felt the impact of electrically charged knuckles rattle his jaw. His body went into convulsions due to the thousands of volts passing through his body with each successive punch. His vision blurred, but he could make out the class forcibly hauling Kaminari off of him. Kaioyuka eyed her secret lover in awe. She had never seen this side of him. In fact, she had never seen him lose his composure since coming to UA. Even when under the threat of villains, he remained relatively collected compared to the rest of them. He always seemed so laid back, and she wasn't exactly sure if she liked this side of him. It wasn't the Kaminari that she had come to care for. Belligerent screaming took place amongst all of the males. Kaminari was unleashing countless expletives at a speed that a sailor would envy. Ida was incessantly lecturing Kaminari on his behavior, but fell on deaf ears. Midoriya, Kirishima, and Zero tried to defuse the situation while the remainder of the guys stoically kept bodies between Kaminari and Bakugo, mostly because they feared Bakugo's reaction once he was back on his feet. "You damn spark plug!" Bakugo screamed irately as he wiped the saliva from his mouth. "What an coward, relying on a cheap shot. You wanna go, you goddamn worm!" Even amongst the yelling, everyone fell silent when Bakugo went on his routine rampage. "Go yourself, Bakugo. I'm sick of your shit. Everyone walks around on eggshells to cater to your fragile-ass ego when the fact of the matter is that nobody likes you. Hell, nobody even understands why a prick like you would ever become a hero." Kaminari felt a tug on his shoulder. Kyoka's eyes were full of apprehension as she timidly shook her head, knowing where Kaminari was going. He looked around to witness the appalled faces of his classmates. Maybe he had taken it too far. Everyone's attention was drawn to a full-scale explosion, leaving black smoke dissipating in the atmosphere, followed by frenzied screaming. Bakugo stormed off screaming profanities, and the rest of the class hesitantly followed behind him. They had to go back to their rooms after all. What nobody happened to notice was Mida slinking off somewhere on his own. "Kaminari, Kyoka, yeah. Kaminari, I'm sorry I acted like that. I didn't mean to scare you." "Kyoka, you didn't scare me, it was fine." "Kaminari, is it cool if I stop by?" "Kyoka, I'm kinda busy. Maybe later." "Kaminari, alright, text me whenever." "Kyoka, KK." Kaminari flailed back onto his bed. "I probably seem like the biggest douchebag right now. I shouldn't have said all that shit." Kaminari's disposition for being laid back and friendly worked against him in times like these. People were often estranged whenever he lost his cool because it happened so seldom. His biggest fear is that people would see this Kaminari as the real one and the one they had gotten to know as a fraud. He knew he wasn't like this at all and that he had just been pushed to his breaking point by the biggest bully on campus. Kyoka, being too busy to talk to him, did absolutely nothing to help his ailing self-esteem. Kyoka's thumbs fiddled around with her phone as she stared at the blank screen. She wanted to see Kaminari, but he was right. She was scared of that side of him. She's never seen him be the aggressor, and that totally shifted her view of him as much as she tried not to let it affect her. There was another feeling that she wouldn't bring herself to admit to. That aggression caused her to tighten her legs. She scolded herself for the very notion that she enjoyed his assertion over Bakugo, whom nobody ever went against. That wasn't an assertiveness that she was accustomed to with the easygoing personality he had. Her phone buzzed and lit up before her eyes. "Uraraka, how's everything? You okay? Is Kaminari okay?" Kyoka can't see any reason not to be fine. "How should I know how Kaminari is feeling?" "Uraraka, oh Simon, stop lying to yourself. There's totally something going on between you two." Kyoka, as if he was a real jackass today, even if it was Bakugo. "I don't see how anyone would want someone capable of being that much of a..." "Uraraka, you know yourself that Bakugo has been pushing his buttons ever since we started classes here." Kyoka, still, it isn't like him and I don't like it. "Uraraka, tell him that then also. For the record, I know about what happened in your room, so don't play dumb." Kyoka, Mina. "Uraraka, don't worry about it. She told Deku-kun and me, but we were in no position to judge, trust me." "Well." Kyoka felt the corners of her lips upturn as she chuckled. "Kyoka, I figured you guys were perving all over each other." "Uraraka, what? No, we aren't that bad." Kyoka, "Uraraka, we are kinda bad." Kyoka figured. "So hats it like." Uraraka, it hurts a bit the first time." Kyoka, that's what I was afraid of. Uraraka, it does get WAAAY better though." Kyoka spent the next hour learning as much as she could from her classmate. She strangely felt much closer to Uraraka than she had in the past. Perhaps it was because they had new common ground with one another. Either way, Kyoka was grateful for the friendship she had made at UA and thought Kaminari was deserving of another chance. No matter how entertaining classes at UA could get, there seemed to be no such excitement when it came to the basic fundamental courses required by the school. Math, English, science, etc. were all inescapable and dragged on endlessly as far as Kaminari was concerned. He wasn't even sure what class he was in, and the gibberish on the chalkboard didn't help him decipher that question. Unlike his investment into the hero courses, these courses bored him stiff, which gave him a little too much freedom to steep in his thoughts. It's been 3 days and Kyoka has hardly even looked his way, much less talked to him. He was still kicking himself for what he did, regardless of whether or not it had just cause. Hindsight is 20/20 after all, he reminded himself. He wanted to apologize to Kyoka, to everyone, if they'd hear him out. His pride and fear of doing further damage prevented him from absolving himself. He felt like he was bound beneath the surface of a body of water. He felt cold but tranquil. His mind meandered from negative thought to negative thought as his surroundings dissolved into darkness. He contemplated how he had portrayed himself up until this point. His laid-back demeanor was always who he was, wasn't it, or was it just a ploy to try and appear cool in front of girls? He wasn't so sure after his outburst. The words "who am I" echoed through his mind over and over to the point that it warped into a ringing in his head. He came to the epiphany that he had been having an identity crisis for quite some time now. He started working towards better fitness and better grades for that reason to find out who the hell he was. The ringing in his head appeared to get louder and louder to the point it was obnoxious. He jolted back to reality and realized that he had slept through class and the dismissal bell was sounding off. He drearily dragged himself out of his seat and slouched as he walked towards the exit, not paying attention to his classmates' fixated gaze. It was all one big misunderstanding. His classmates were concerned about his well-being. Nobody knew how to process what happened since this behavior was an abnormality for Kaminari. It remained unspoken, but the class universally decided that giving him some space was the best option. Although to Kaminari, he was being alienated from the people he considered his friends. He just wished that anybody, would pull his head back above water. He could feel the black mass in the pit of his stomach weighing him down. The temptation to resign himself to that feeling and shut down emotionally was plucking a melancholy tune on his heartstrings. The stroll back to the dorms was unlike most days. Kaminari was ahead of the pack, lazily trudging back to his room where he could rest his aching head. Most of the class would have outpaced his saunter by now, but they all followed cautiously behind him. Nobody thought that he would go into another fit of rage. It was purely to respect his space. Kayuka watched Kaminari's back intently. She could tell by his posture how tortured he was. She wasn't sure if the Bakugo situation was strictly because of Bakugo or if there was something else bothering him. Her heart ached while she watched him, begging her to do something about it, but she didn't have the courage. She was angry with herself for being such a coward and shutting him out. She knew deep down that he didn't deserve that. Midoriya was observing all of this play out the past couple days and had talked it over with Uraraka in private multiple times. Just like he always tried to help Bakugo, Todoroki, or anybody else in his class, he felt obligated to try and talk to Kaminari. He knew it was the right thing to do, but like everyone else, he was trying to give him a chance to breathe. He was misguided enough to believe that Kaminari needed his space as well. He felt like it wasn't really like him, but he vowed to speak with him when he had the chance. Later that evening, while the class was socializing in the common area, both Kaminari and Kayuka both isolated themselves to their respective rooms. Kayuka excused herself to study while Kaminari hadn't left the confines of his room since class had ended. The class was a touch too anxious to check up on their sparky friend. Kayuka couldn't quite comprehend what gnawed her to pick up her phone and text him, but she did. Kayuka, hey. Kaminari, what's kickin'? Kayuka, not much. How have you been? Kaminari, I'm cool. Not much to really worry about, with how peaceful things have been. Kayuka, you sure? Kaminari, yeah. Their conversation had fizzled out as quickly as it had begun. Kayuka felt awful for not being able to find the words she knew she needed to say to him. If only her anxiety wasn't so damn stubborn. It infuriated her that it crept in whenever she really didn't need it. With a deep breath and a gulp, Kayuka steeled herself and sent a text. She felt ridiculous, bracing herself for impact like her phone was going to explode in her hand. Kayuka, we didn't get to go on that date. Let me take you out to this really cool music-themed restaurant that just opened up downtown. My treat. Kaminari blinked absent-mindedly at his phone screen. It took a couple seconds to register, but when it did, his golden eyes popped open in shock. He was convinced that not only had he ruined his reputation with his classmates, but that he tarnished any chances he had with Kayuka. The black mass sitting in the pit of his stomach the past few days exploded into a flourish of butterflies. The number of times he had to correct the typos in his text purely because his fingers fumbled nervously was laughable. Kaminari, I'm totally in Kaio. Wanna go tomorrow after school? Kayuka felt like she had been holding her breath ever since she had sent the text. The moment her phone buzzed, her heart had stopped. Finally gathering the courage to check her phone, she was pleasantly surprised and allowed herself an exasperated sigh of relief. Thank goodness he's okay. The sun was shining, a cool breeze was whistling by, and there wasn't a single cloud in sight. The temperature today was pretty moderate, so by all accounts, today was a beautiful day. Even if torrential rain had battered the streets and the clouds gorged themselves to the brim with crackles of lightning and the ominous roar of thunder, today would be as perfect as any to Kaminari. After all, the girl he had been crushing on since he joined UA was taking him on a date. How cool is that, Kaminari thought to himself. He couldn't help but grin ear to ear whenever he thought about it. He had spent all morning daydreaming about the date and about Kayuka. He thought about all of the things that he adored about her and mocked himself internally for being so damn cheesy. The last thing that he had hoped for was that Kayuka would ever think that he just wanted her for her body. Based on their first interaction, it would be easy to understand how a person could come to that conclusion. Kaminari wanted her to know that she was so much more than that to him. Even if she made fun of him on the regular, he wanted her to know how breathtaking she truly was for him. Her laugh, her sense of style, her taste in music, her skill with numerous instruments, her voice, heck, even the way she made fun of him and basically assaulted him with her quirk were endearing qualities to him. Kayuka is pretty dang cool, Kaminari sighed. Kaminari would have been anxious had it not been for the fact that he was so exceptionally giddy. Kayuka, as per usual, was the total opposite. She didn't want to go to Momo again and ask for help with her outfit, but she just did not know how she wanted to present herself. She was scrutinizing every outfit and coming up with the most ridiculous reasons as to why each outfit was not it. One jacket had too many buttons, a pair of jeans were the wrong shade of navy, a shirt that had a flaming skull on it. No way that was happening. Kayuka flailed onto her bed in defeat. Thankfully it was Saturday and she had all day to figure this out. Even with several hours remaining, she knew the clock was ticking and ticking fast. Why am I panicking over this so much? Kaminari is pretty laid back, so I can't see him really dressing up for our date, but I don't want to be the one that's all casual, Kyoyuka grumbled into her pillow. She didn't understand why she was making such a big deal about something so trivial. Kaminari was her friend who she happened to really like and wanted to impress. One would never say that if they had to watch any normal interaction between the two. Stretched out across her bed, she started thinking about the night he had caught her writing music. She was so incredibly flustered, and some of those lingering emotions rushed back to her cheeks. She appreciated what he had to say about her music from the bottom of her heart. She wanted to be more open and honest, not just with him but with herself. She sprung up from her bed and picked out an outfit she was finally satisfied with. I hope he likes it. Kaminari decided that he should hit up the gym. He had been going pretty consistently, and it was nice to know that he was sticking to his plan to be a better person all around. It also might not hurt to pump a bit of iron to make his muscles seem a little bigger before his date. He turned the corner to see familiar spiky, red hair. Do you live here, bro? I'm starting to think that your dorm room is just for storage, Kaminari chortled. Kirishima laughed in unison with his friend. I mean, you do what you gotta do to stay on top of your game. I'm glad to see that you haven't given up on your manly journey. Kirishima patted him on the shoulder and gestured to the bench press as if to offer him a spot. Kaminari grinned in response, and as he brushed past Kirishima's shoulder, his smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. Bakugo was also here, and the two had locked eyes. Kirishima caught wind of the tension immediately and lunged his body between the two of them. No words were being exchanged, but the two were having a full-on argument with nothing other than body language. Bakugo stood up from the machine he was on and looked ready for combat, as he always did. He looked thirsty for revenge after Kaminari blindsided him in front of the whole class. Kaminari's hair stood up all over his body. He knew that in a head-on fight that the result would be the same as their first fight. He wasn't a monstrously gifted prodigy like Bakugo, but he couldn't back down either. He gulped inaudibly and lowered his stance slightly. Two of you cut this shit out now, Kirishima yelled at the top of his lungs, much to the surprise of both Bakugo and Kaminari. Kaminari looked at him puzzled, while Bakugo's face just dialed down 2 levels of irritated. You guys are both training to be heroes. When do you see heroes fight amongst themselves, Bakugo? What's wrong with Kaminari trying to better himself? What's wrong with him building his confidence? How hard is it to just let someone else do their best without having to give them a reality check on the fact that everyone else is insignificant compared to you? TCH, Bakugo had nothing to say. The only thought that crossed his mind was that Kirishima is lucky that he's a good friend, otherwise he'd have to kick both of their asses. Kaminari just looked kind of dumbstruck, but glad that his friend had picked up for him. And you, Kirishima started, pointing a judgmental finger at Kaminari. Kaminari felt as if he had shrunk, seeing the frustration in his friend's face. This isn't like you at all, man. You've never had an aggressive bone in your body. You've never been out here picking fights. You've only ever concerned yourself with helping people when you have to fight. What happened to that, Kaminari? I know you've been under a lot of stress lately, but we are training to be goddamn heroes. We're supposed to be built for that stress. We're supposed to be built for that suffering, that ridicule, and still remain unwavering in our pursuit to save others. We aren't taught to use our quirks for petty bullshit like this. That goes for you too, Bakugo. With that, Kirishima stormed off, not caring what happened to the two after he had said his piece. They can blow each other to bits or work it out. I don't give a. The two could hear him still ranting as he walked down the hallway. A few moments later, the reality that the two of them were in the gym alone had dawned on them. Kaminari clenched his fists and glared at Bakugo. Why? What? Bakugo grunted back. Why do you treat me like I'm trash? What did I ever do to deserve that? I tried being your friend, but that clearly didn't work. So, why? When did I say that you weren't my friend? You can be both trash and my friend at the same time. Kaminari was both puzzled and extremely annoyed. How the heck can you call what you do to others being friends? Maybe you just don't get me. I'm trying to get to the top, and all I know is that I don't need any weak people to weigh me down. If you can't see the challenge I'm offering you to be better than you currently are, it isn't my fault that your brain is fried beyond repair from overusing your quirk. What kind of logic is that, man? That shit is so ed up. Not everyone needs to strive for the top. I just want to help other people and look cool doing it. I don't need to be the best or near the best to accomplish that. Everyone here should strive to the top. Even if it's only going to be me at the top, everyone should work their asses off to be the best so that everyone can save more people and defeat more villains. There's no place for a slacker at UA. It finally clicked in Kaminari's head. Bakugo was testing his new resolve to be a better version of himself. He was testing him to see if this was just a temporary burst of motivation or genuine growth to his character. Kaminari still hated him for it, but he at least somewhat understood the ridiculous logic behind Bakugo's views. Bakugo could also clearly see the epiphany taking place on Kaminari's face and just smirked. I still hate you for being a jerk, you know. Shut up and spot me. Well, switch after a couple of sets. Finish stroll. Kaminari felt leagues better than he did before. Between feeling proud of yet another successful workout and a rekindled friendship with Bakugo, if you could call it that, Kaminari felt invincible. On his way back to his room, he walked through the common area to see Kirishima grouchily watching sports on the TV. I should probably tell him that everything is all good between Bakugo and me. "Oi, Kirishima." Kirishima turned his head while remaining seated on the couch. The penetrating stare with gritted, shark-like teeth evaporated any sense of invulnerability that Kaminari had coming from the gym. 3W worked things out with Bakugo dude, Kaminari stammered out. As quickly as Kaminari had gotten the words out, Kirishima had leaped over the couch and wrapped his arm around Kaminari's shoulder with a smile so wide it could make Zero jealous. Kaminari was so confused at his friend's sudden change in disposition towards him, but he rolled with it. "See, was that so hard? I know Bakugo is a tough guy to get along with, so you have to tread carefully, but I'm so glad you guys worked things out." Now that's the epitome of masculinity. Kirishima could feel himself welling up and wiped his eyes preemptively. "You want to go out and hit up the mall or something, dude?" Kirishima asked, bursting with energy. "Nah man, I've got plans later and I don't want to risk being late," Kaminari replied, finally pulling his buddy's arm away from his neck. "Plans with a certain young girl in our class." "Kind of plans?" Kirishima drawled. "Are they age-appropriate plans?" Kirishima wrapped his arm around Kaminari's neck once more. Kaminari knew full well his friend wasn't about to release his grip without sensitive information, but he was both excited and nervous to tell him about it. "Yeah, and going out with Kaio to that new music-themed restaurant that opened up a few weeks ago." "Kaio, what an adorable nickname." Kaminari shivered as he heard Mina squeal in his ear from behind. "What the hell, Mina, you frightened me half to death, dude," Kaminari yelled, clinging onto his chest. Kirishima burst into laughter at his pretty cute. Also, Kirishima nudged Kaminari and placed something in the palm of his hands. Kaminari looked and then suddenly turned bright red. "Condoms, dude, seriously, and why the hell did you give me like a dozen?" "Well, you never know, dude. You didn't need them last time." But Kirishima froze. Kaminari didn't know that he knew about that time, and he suddenly felt painfully guilty for not mentioning it earlier. "You knew about that?" Kirishima turned to glare at Mina, who waved her hands in front of herself while nervously giggling to plead for a softer punishment. "Two did. But I was the one who kept Mina quiet. I told her not to tell anyone, and I've been doing my best to make sure that she wasn't." Mina nodded violently in response to Kirishima's statement, with the two hoping that Kaminari might not be too angry with them. "All right," Kaminari sighed, "I guess you're off the hook, Kirishima." Kaminari started walking back to his room, and as he passed Mina he put a finger on her shoulder and shocked her just enough to make a point. Mina was on the floor twitching and sobbing. Kirishima helped her up and called out after his friend, "Dude, come on, seriously. She shouldn't air out people's dirty secrets." Kaminari shrugged and walked back to his room. "Okay, thanks." Kaiyuka hit the end call button. She had just called the restaurant to make sure that their reservation was still good for 600 p.m. If this were a normal world I wouldn't have to worry about such a thing, but you never know, a villain could destroy the place at any moment. Kaiyuka had managed to calm her nerves. All she had to do was not think about the endless list of things that she wanted to do with Kaminari, both safe and not safe for work. She could manage thinking about the date itself, her outfit, and him exclusively, but the thought of them together in any capacity made her feel like how she imagined Kaminari felt after overusing his quirk. She chuckled at the thought and finished getting dressed. She decided that dressing up in a sleek, rocker chick outfit was the right way to go. It felt genuine and it also fit the theme of the date, so she was glad she could go on the date in an outfit that she felt the most comfortable in. It was 5:15 p.m. and the restaurant was about 20 minutes away. Kaminari had promised over text that he'd be there at 5:30 p.m. so they could walk to the taxi. He had offered to pay for the cab, but Kaiyuka refused unless she got to pay for the cab back. Kaminari reluctantly agreed and told her that she wasn't allowing him to be cool, to which she just smirked at the text, but he wouldn't know that. "Knock knock, come in, it's open," Kaiyuka called out. She wasn't ready to face him, but she knew she was as ready as she was ever going to be. Kaminari walked in wearing something that she didn't quite expect. He was wearing a black jacket with yellow stripes on the sleeves over a shirt from a somewhat popular punk band that came onto the scene about 3 years ago named Sink or Swim. They weren't that popular that everyone listened to them, but they just so happened to be a band that Kaiyuka couldn't help herself but purchase all of their albums. "Ready to go?" Kaminari asked sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. "Your shirt," Kaiyuka pointed in a way she was sure was rude, but she was taken too off guard to care. "You like it?" Kaminari grinned, overjoyed at his crush's reaction. "You didn't get it just to try and impress me or anything, did you?" Kaiyuka would have hated it if that's what he did. The last thing she wanted was a guy that pretended to like the things she liked just to get closer to her. She felt like it was manipulation, plain and simple. "Nah, I was at one of their concerts last year and I enjoyed their music so much that I bought some of their merch and their newest album at the time. I think that they've released another one since I haven't picked up yet." Anchored to the bottom, Kaiyuka said, somewhat spaced out. She wasn't at all ready for this shock. She expected either his usual attire or some kind of semi-formal outfit like he had worn on their study date that went off the rails. She felt her heartbeat grow stronger by the second, just like the kick drum in a song growing progressively louder as it builds. "Kaio, good." Kaminari waved his hand in front of her face as if she were hypnotized, and she attacked him with her quirk in retort. "Oh, that hurt." Kaminari was rubbing his head from the jolting pain. "I think I have a headache now." "I'm sorry." Force of habit, Kaiyuka reached out and helped him up from the floor guiltily. "Wanna go?" Kaiyuka gestured towards the door and he gave her a pretty lame thumbs up. She made a mental note to tease him about it later. The two walked down from their room and of course had to pass through the common area to get outside. Their minds were rattled with thoughts of endless teasing and wondering just how many of their peers would be there waiting, like lions, ready to pounce on such an easy target. The answer: all of them. The entire class lounged about in the common area, some on the couches, some on the floor, some standing up leaning against the walls. It was as if they were all waiting to see them off. I figured that it may be a good idea to text everyone to come hang out in the lounge, just in case any lovebirds happened to walk through. Mina mewled while resting her head on the back of the couch. I didn't forget about you zapping me, Kaminari. Mina winked at them both while grinning mischievously. Mina, why? Before Kaminari had the chance to say anything, the teasing had already started. All kinds of oohs, ahs, comments on their punk rock outfits, classmates making Y faces at them, you name it, and Class 1A did it. Not everyone had joined in. Takoyami, Shoji, Todoroki, and Bakugo didn't seem to care, but their presence was still enough to reiterate the chide remarks even through their lack of concern. After their childish antics were finished, silence fell over the lounge, but the smiles had yet to fade from their faces. You guys done? Kaminari asked while wincing in fear of more. We all really hope you guys have a great time, isn't that right everyone? Mina beamed as everyone gave their support either in the form of verbal approval, a nod, or a thumbs up. The pair couldn't help but think that they had made some awesome friends. Thanks guys, don't wait up, Kaminari waved with a flawless smile as he pulled a blushing Kaioyuka by the hand to her surprise. Hey, what a couple of cuties, Mina screamed. Can you imagine having two couples in the same class get together in like a month? Crazy stuff, Mina sighed. With that said, the attention shifted to the other couple sitting very quietly on one of the couches holding hands. Oh no, both Midori and Uraraka thought simultaneously. Tension inexplicably filled the air. The cab transmogrified into a claustrophobic box rather than an all too expensive means of transportation. Kaioyuka could feel herself suffocating with anxiety and insecurity forcibly penetrating her lungs. She peered down at the seat to see Kaminari's hand nonchalantly resting as he stared idly out the window at the passing traffic. Maybe he feels as awkward about all of this as I do. I don't get it though. We've done tired. I can't help but feel super anxious. I can't even reach out and hold his hand for sake. Him gonna do it. I mean it. Deep breaths, Kaioyuka, we got this. 3 Twun. Kaminari swiveled to sneak a peek at Kaioyuka at precisely the right moment to catch her staring intently at his hand. Kaioyuka shifted her eyes upward only to become aware that he was looking at her with shimmering golden irises that she could swear had mild heat vision. Her face began to simmer brightly with embarrassment as he gave her a toothy grin that she was all too familiar with. What she didn't know was that he happened to be so nervous that he couldn't bring himself to look in her general direction, and seeing her so flustered reassured him that this meant as much to her as it did to him. Kaioyuka looked out the window at the traffic to hide blushing cheeks when she felt his hand curl around her own and his fingers, which she spent far too much time thinking about, intertwining with hers. She felt a small gasp escape from her mouth and prayed that it wasn't audible, but after hearing him chuckle lightly she hung her head down in shame. You know, you two could make it a little less obvious that this is your first date, right? The cab driver intervened in their awkward little display. He was an older gentleman with a large white mustache and wore a hat over what Kaminari speculated with a bald spot large and shiny enough to serve as a beacon for ships lost at sea. I remember when I met my wife, the cab driver began. It was 43 years ago. She was perhaps the most beautiful woman that I had ever seen. Long brown hair, beautiful green eyes, and a laugh that could nearly make my heart stop. She was really something. She was really something, to the point that I didn't even have the nerve to talk to her for a full year after laying eyes on her, but I was convinced she was the love of my life. Eventually I worked up the courage and asked her on a date, and we've been married for 41 years. That's a sweet story, sir, Kaioyuka responded respectfully, not knowing how to react. I guess my point is, you two, if you really have feelings for one another, you should leave the nerves behind and just be yourselves. I was lucky enough to end up with my wife, but to this day I regret that I didn't have the courage sooner. We could have used that time to make even more fond memories. Cherish what you have in front of you right now and don't waste that time tiptoeing around in fear of things going wrong. We appreciate that, sir. Kaminari nodded and smiled slightly. I hope you young'uns listen, but we're at your stop anyway, so enjoy yourselves. Kaminari and Kaioyuka had split the bill but agreed upon giving the man a little bit extra for being so kind and thoughtful. Leave it to the wisdom of an elderly cab driver to alleviate any anxiety that the two might have felt. With a deep breath, Kaioyuka reached out and grabbed her date's hand, and the two couldn't help but smile at one another. Shall we? Kaminari asked, barely containing the giddiness behind his grin. We shall, Kaioyuka responded with a relaxed smirk on her face. It wasn't long before the waiter had seated them both. The two gawked around in awe at all of the historical memorabilia, from costumes to instruments to records. You name it, and this place had it all. The menu was heavily stylized with sections named after bands, and the cuisine being mostly based on what part of the world they were from, with all of the dishes named after famous songs with little footers explaining what each meal consisted of. The waiter appeared with a glistening jug of ice water and complimentary breadsticks that looked like they were from a photo shoot for a commercial. Kaminari was resisting the urge to dramatically reach for them and start going to town on them like some sort of savage. Kaioyuka, on the other hand, didn't hesitate to reach for a breadstick and start nibbling, seemingly ignoring the fact that the waiter was still present waiting for their order. What? Kaioyuka asked, slightly irritated at Kaminari's chuckle. "I'm hungry." "Nothing, don't worry about it," Kaminari responded, still chuckling cheerfully. "I'm gonna get the same old song and dance with bacon," Kaminari told the waiter. The same old song and dance was a double-decker cheeseburger with curly fries and a tall glass of Coca-Cola. It was classic and befitting the name of the popular rock song by Aerosmith. Kyoyuka pondered. "I think I'm gonna go with the Bohemian Rhapsody with a side of rice but with no soda please." The Bohemian Rhapsody consisted of spare ribs with onion sauce, which were notably a favorite of Queen frontman Freddie Mercury. The waiter quickly jotted down their orders and encouraged them to wave him down if they needed anything else. Kyoyuka nodded as she continued to nibble on her breadstick from earlier to Kaminari's amusement. "I didn't think y'd go for something like spare ribs with onion sauce, Kyo. Guess you don't know me as well as you thought." Kyoyuka winked at him and immediately winced internally for winking at him, ever overanalyzing her every move. That's when it hit her. Oh no, is he going to get the wrong idea and think that I'm getting spare ribs with onion sauce because I'm trying to avoid him now? I'm nervous about him again, but at least I can admit to myself that I do want to do it, as embarrassing as that is. Thank God his quirk isn't mind reading. That's when Kyoyuka remembered that there was a small convenience store 2 buildings down from the restaurant. She could buy a pack of gum and she would be safe. But wait, if I buy a pack of gum in front of him, then he's going to get the idea that he has to me, and I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him when we're out to have a good time. Hey, why am I like this? Kyoyuka, not realizing she had been spaced out for a couple minutes now, snapped to attention when she heard Kaminari's voice. Are you good, Kyo? You seem pretty tense. Anything on your mind? Kyoyuka sighed and thought about the wise words of their thickly mustached cab driver. I guess I'm just really nervous and I don't understand why. Phew, I thought I was the only one. Kaminari leaned back in his chair and his posture relaxed. I'm like actively trying not to say too much because I'm so scared I'm going to sound like an idiot and you're going to regret coming out here with me. To be honest, I don't think I could regret saying yes to this date. I'm pretty happy I'm here with you. Kyoyuka could feel her cheeks betraying her, and she was hoping that Kaminari wouldn't poke fun at her vulnerability, but she wouldn't blame him for all the teasing he endures at her hands. She looked up from the table and could see that she wasn't the only one who was slightly embarrassed at her words. I'm not good at this, and I know that we may have started off in the wrong order, but I'm happy that we're doing this now, Kyo. You're super awesome, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Kyoyuka's heart skipped a beat. How dare he be this sweet to me, but I really do like this Kaminari better than the one that's always trying to be cool. Just as Kyoyuka was about to spill yet another sentimental statement, the waiter arrived with the food and saved her from exposing herself more than she would have liked. Thank God I'm starving, Kaminari exclaimed. Kyoyuka giggled and the two grabbed their utensils. After a delectable meal, the two worked out the bill and headed out of the restaurant. Kaminari was about to wave down a cab. Kyoyuka pulled on his arm and told him about the convenience store just a few dozen steps away. Kaminari obliged and the two walked with arms linked down the street. It was an uncomfortable action for the novice couple, but one that filled both of their hearts with warmth. Kyoyuka attempted to pick up a few small things to distract from the fact that she was picking up a pack of gum for any potential makeout sessions in the near future. Kaminari was definitely not that discreet, just outright buying a single pack of gum and a bottle of water, which Kyoyuka couldn't help but sigh defeatedly for the man's lack of tact. The two were about to leave the store when a tall man in a navy trench coat attempted to rob the place. Kaminari gave a quick glance to Kyoyuka as if to say fine help and tackled the man to the ground. Kyoyuka ran out the door without looking back, trusting that Kaminari would be okay until she managed to track down the police or a hero. The tall man melted into a puddle of water on the floor only to reconstitute himself a moment later, berating our lightning hero for his pathetic attempt at subduing him, but Kaminari was too busy using his training at UA to analyze the situation, so his words sounded like nothing more than muffled noise. The shopkeeper is still here and I saw one other customer. Both of their lives are in danger and I don't know if they are even equipped to defend themselves. He clearly has a quirk that turns his body into water, but that's all I know about it. That would put me at an advantage, but without my disc launcher I can't precisely aim and it'll risk electrocuting two innocent people. This is bad. The robber was irritated by the fact that Kaminari wasn't even paying attention to him, and with one quick motion liquefied his own arm and extended it forward at Kaminari. He was far too fast to dodge, and the water engulfed Kaminari's head in a pocket of water. The villain cackled as he slowly lifted Kaminari off the ground. Kaminari could feel the tension in his chest, the all-powerful desire to breathe urging him to forego his surroundings and gasp for air. He knew that his control as well as his consciousness were fading, but if he gave in to his instincts, he'd surely perish. How long has it been? 5 minutes. Kaminari's vision blurred. Where am I? What am I doing here in cold? Images of his life were flashing before him. It took a moment, but he realized he was dying. He remembered all that he struggled through to get to this point, and his mind turned to the future he wanted with Kyoyuka. If I'm going out, I'm taking him with me. I'm sorry to anybody else in the area, but I'm giving him all the juice I've got. When suddenly he was released from his watery grave. He looked through blurred vision to make out a familiar shape. Kyoyuka had used her sound waves to disturb the consistency of the water, forcing the villain to release him. Kaminari looked around dazed. As his senses came back to him, he realized there was now no one left in the store aside from the three of them and a horde of police outside brandishing weapons. This was his chance. All Kyoyuka had to do was get far enough away. Kaminari struggled to his feet and attempted to yell for her to run, but it couldn't escape his lips. The villain turned towards Kyoyuka and lunged forward to capture her in the same way that Kaminari had been just moments prior. Kaminari urgently lunged for the man as he moved towards Kyoyuka, and with one locked stare it was as if Kyoyuka read his soul. She turned away and ran as fast as she could, hoping desperately that she remained out of reach. The villain was mere inches away from the collar of her jacket when he felt a tug on his trench coat. Stay away from her. Kaminari glared at him with such intensity he swore this kid could erase him from existence. That moment of viciousness was enough to make the villain hesitate and create a big enough space between them that he could unleash all of his thunderous might. Electricity arced ferociously in the small area surrounding them, leaving the villain unconscious and frothing at the mouth. Kaminari embraced the cold, hard pavement and was lulled to sleep by the sounds of nearby sirens.